Yeah, I know, everyone. I haven't fixed the audio yet for my opener, so I will get to it when I can. I do intend to. I just haven't had a chance to doing just yet. So, anyways, good morning, afternoon, evening. If you're on a flat Earth, it doesn't really matter. Anywhere, any time zone is good as any other time zone. I am doing Steve Sunday School, which is just because I can't think of any original name for this stupid thing. But I got Cheshire here, who actually I was talking about something completely unrelated about an hour ago, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to do a live on noon, and I can't find anybody else, and I'd rather not do it to myself, and I'm lonely, and I have no life. Will you please come join me?" And she said, "Steve, who?" I was like, but she's going to kind of join me for this. Hey, well, morning, Chesh, by the way.
Good morning.
So let's see what we got here. I got to pull up my stream here.
It's pajama chesh time.
But I got okay. There you go.
Pajama, because it's Sundays.
Yeah, I produced my own stuff for
pants
this.
actually match Steve's sweater.
Yeah, this is my Sunday sweater. I wear this now on Sundays. That's what I'm going to be doing. It's my dad type sweater. I think, you know what? It might have actually even been my dad's. There was a strong...
No.
I really think that this was actually my dad's sweater at one time. I can't prove that, and I'm not 100% positive, but it is quite possible, because I don't know else how I would have gotten a sweater like this. And he did wear sweaters like this, so... and it's a little big on me. So if it is, then great. I mean, even if it isn't, it still makes me feel like, you know, I'm remembering my dad, right? Who passed away several years ago. Speaking of passing away, yes, it is true. Kobe Bryant did pass away. He was in a helicopter accident. I guess there was 5 people killed in that accident, one of which was him. His wife was not on board, Vanessa, I believe her name is. But it's always sad when I hear stuff like that. That somebody who's like, I don't follow sports, but you know, he's definitely one of the biggest names in sports. And for somebody to have that much talent and have that much, you know, popularity to die in something so tragic and accidental, it sucks. Yeah. So, but anyways, Chess, what do you got for us before we get into the main topic of the day here?
I have already begun defiling my Discord and browser history with non sequitur topics. I'm not going to tell you what topics because it will be a surprise. But
I don't like surprises.
I do believe I have arrived to the more weird parts of the internet. Hooray!
Yeah, I don't think you know what you're in for when you're trying to find guests for non sequitur and stuff like that. We've had to dive into the dankest, darkest corners of the internet.
You guys were on the incel boards.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't on them, but yeah, they knew about us, and we had people on there talking to the incels, and I'm sure eventually we're probably going to find somebody with a Tor browser and do the deep dark web stuff.
Oh Lord, yeah, are we gonna revisit incels?
I don't see why not. I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't mind.
We're gonna have a lot of controversial stuff, so I wouldn't mind revisiting. I mean, we still need to find out what really ever happened to Sergeant. Remember him? Whatever his name was. Sarge. It was Sarge, wasn't it? Sarge? The one incel that actually changed his position.
Oh, he was... Yeah, I interacted with him a lot on the Non Sequitur Discord. Some of the way he communicates is really frustrating, where he would ask questions just to try and start conversation, which is fine, but then he would just log off. And it was just like... Why are you starting a conversation that you're not interested in or you don't want to see the answers? So that got a little bit frustrating. I'm pretty sure he got kicked out of the Discord eventually, but it escapes me as to why. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it
wasn't Gigacell. Gigacell was the Catfish Man. Was it Gigacell? I don't remember.
There was Surge, Gigacell, Catfish Man. I don't know. I thought they were kind of the same.
I might be able
I don't
to
remember.
find out.
It was so long ago, and I just wasn't really involved in that side of that discussion that much. Dark web saves me too, and I have never been on the dark web, but maybe we'll find somebody who at least knows a little bit about the dark web, and we're going to be talking about how that works and some other stuff. And I don't have Non Sequitur show yet back. The order was to have it immediately turned back over to me, not 14 days. That is correct. Scott Hufford actually pointed that out, that it wasn't 14 days to have the channel turned over to me. It was immediately. And we have drafted a very stern letter to Kyle to return it immediately. And in theory, if we wanted to, as of even Monday, we could petition the judge for a civil contempt charge. Whether we decide to do that, I don't know. But it was immediate. He has 14 days to turn over the books, but the turning over of the channel and all passwords and names were immediately supposed to be turned over to my lawyer. So,
Well,
yeah, well, who knew? I didn't even think about it. The reason why I didn't catch it is because in the original draft he did have 14 days on the motion that we gave to the judge. We said 14 days. Now we're gonna have to decide whether we're going to allow that or not, because as Red said, of the graciousness of my heart to allow him the full 14 days. But I don't think I'm that gracious, so I don't know.
Give him 7. Let him have half.
No, immediately is immediately. You know.
Have that 50%.
I mean, what's another few dollars to petition the judge and have a thing on Monday saying, hey, this was supposed to be immediate. We gave him a letter 24 hours later. He has not done it. Therefore, that is. Oh, Sean Huffer's actually in the live chat. Sean, since when the hell do you watch my shit, dude?
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. But hey, look, Sean. At least I give credit where credit is due, right? I didn't know.
I see him pop in here every so often.
I very rarely see Sean over here. I wish he would come around more.
That's because you don't pay as much attention to the chat as I do.
I do pay attention. I'm watching it right now. How do you think I knew it was in there? And I listened to.
You weren't watching it now. I said I watch it more closely than you do.
Oh, that's probably true. Sean, you did a masterful job on the debate the other day, moderating, because I was thinking the exact same thing when you stopped it, and you said, "Dude, this is supposed to be positive evidence for your sides to Rad Vlad," and I was like, spot on, right? And I only watched like the first half of the debate, but what I saw was really good, and so
I was just bashing my head against a wall, and I just every so often was sending out a link of a gif of someone bashing their head against a wall.
Yeah. But anyway, Sean, like, there you go. You know that I give credit where credit is due, because I didn't even see you in the live chat.
It is well done. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, the topic of discussion today for Steve's Sunday School. I'm gonna have to change the name of that. If anybody got some ideas, please let me know. I can think of good title names. I'm pretty decent like titling stuff. I'm crappy at coming up with like a Sunday thing, because it used to be the Sunday show because I couldn't think of anything. There was a Steve's Sunday School. I don't know. I gotta think of something for Sunday. And no, you won't get anything out of it, but help me out. But whatever. I like to do stuff on Sundays. I was going to do something with Dr. Kroon today. We were going to talk about holographic principle and information theory, but he'd rather talk about some other stuff, and that's not something he's that familiar with, the firewall paradox. And so I'm going to have to find somebody else who wants to talk about that. Although we might eventually, but I'm going to talk about it one way or another, but I'm going to find somebody. All right, so today's discussion, I was going on my Twitter, and people, I like when people tag me in stuff that I'm actually interested in, right? And so somebody actually tagged me in a tweet by Ricky Gervais. By the way, there's different ways he even says people pronounce his name, but he says Ricky Gervais. So I'm going to call him Gervais, whether it's something else or not. I'm just going to go by Gervais. But he had a tweet, and there's something that he has actually put out before. He had just basically reiterated to somebody who was asking him, why do you identify as atheist and agnostic? And one of the things that I'm a little bit pet peeved about is that there's people out there with bigger platforms, such as Jacqueline Glenn, Hemet Mentit, which is the friendly atheist, which, by the way, really nice guy. He's been on the Non Sequitur show, and I really wish we would have had a chance to actually talk about this topic, but he wasn't interested in this topic, even though he makes statements about this topic and he gets them, I do what I believe to be incorrect. But they have larger platforms where they can say things with impunity and not be held accountable for it if they're putting out misinformation. Jacqueline Glenn did this on the Rubin Report years ago, and I've been trying to contact her since then. I even had Pimp Monk reach out to her, and I don't know if he ever did. He said he was going to. But Jacqueline Glenn, for some reason, doesn't want to talk about that topic, and yet she pontificates on atheism and agnosticism. And she's happy to talk to people. She was on Mr. Atheist the other day, and she'll talk to theists. She talked to Wayne Fillmore, who was the first person that I did a debate with on Macroevolution, who left Young Earth Creationism not long afterwards. She'll talk to any of them, but Jacqueline Glenn won't talk to me on this particular topic, and I do not know why. She's made very clear her statements, categorical statements about agnosticism that are just incorrect. And Ricky has done the exact same thing. He put out a tweet based upon a question that was asked a while back called, "Why are you atheist or agnostic?" And I'm going to screen share that in a second here. But Jester, did you see that tweet? Are you familiar with what Jacqueline Glenn said on the Rubin Report or any of that?
No, I only saw briefly like little snippets of what was happening before I was, knee deep in weird internet stuff.
You really are going to do that weird internet stuff, aren't you?
Oh, yep.
You don't know what you're in for.
This is my job now.
Yeah, she has more than one job now. She used to just have one job. All right, let me see if I can get this entire tweet in
Pretty
here.
sure I've always had more than one job.
Not really. Just sit there. That's all you got to do.
Oh, all right.
I want to be able to make this large enough so people can read it without making it too large. All right.
I mean, good luck.
That should be okay. I think that's good right there. I can scroll down. All right, so they don't need to look at us. We know what we look like. So if anybody ever gets a hold of Jacqueline Glenn, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Jacqueline either. I think she's got more to the drama side. So
maybe that's why she doesn't want to talk to you.
But well, she still talks about certain things. But she still said these things, and she's never corrected them. So it's still out there, and people are still taking her as gospel.
At word, yeah. Or
Yeah,
at face
so
value.
anybody who gets a hold of Jacqueline Glenn, let her know that I'm willing to have a conversation with her on my channel, Non Sequitur Show, any other channel. I'm even off air. I don't care.
Or tell you what, she can talk to me if she
doesn't
doesn't want to talk to Steve because he's big meanie poopy head.
I'm a big meanie poopy. All right, so that's my thing to Jacqueline Glenn. Jacqueline, if you ever hear this, I'm happy to have an off-air discussion with you as well. But I would like to correct you on some of the things that you actually did fundamentally get wrong, which I have citations for. All right. But Ricky said this. He had a tweet, and the tweet read basically along the lines of, I've answered this, and this is what I said about it, something along those lines. So, question was, why are you atheist and not agnostic? His answer, we'll start by going by the paragraphs. I am technically both, and they are not mutually exclusive. They deal with different things. One deals with knowledge, one deals with belief. Now, this is straight out of the Matt Dillahunty atheist, Austin community, was it the Austin Atheist Community of Austin. This is straight out of their playbook, right? This is like parroting right after what they said, right? But this is not at all correct. They are mutually exclusive positions. They have fundamentally mutually exclusive positions because they represent different epistemic states towards the proposition of God existing. So when they say one deals with knowledge, they're conflating agnosticism as what would be called an epistemological proposition, which is the knowability of God, with the ontological position of not believing that God exists and not believing God does not exist. Now, we've explained this a billion times, and so I don't want to go into too much about that. My main purpose on this particular episode is to explain to people, when somebody has a large platform like Ricky Gervais has. Gervais. I'm going to do that. Ricky Gervais has. He has millions of followers, and they just take this blindly, like, oh, well, Ricky Gervais is saying it, therefore it must be true, and he doesn't have any accountability to correct it. Same thing with Jacqueline Glenn. There was no accountability to correct it. Same with the Friendly Atheist, who I like very much. No accountability to correct it. And I actually reached out to Hemet a long time ago, before he was even on the Non Sequitur Show. And I said, you've been saying stuff that I think is incorrect. Would you like to talk about it? And he said, nah, not really. I'm just not interested in that topic. Yet he continues to talk about it.
Yeah,
that I find to be a little disingenuous.
That's a little bit not cool. If you're going to talk about a subject and somebody says, well, hey, I disagree with you. Can we talk about why we disagree? It's not like, it's one thing if like some random account comes up to you and they're a random person, not somebody who actually studies philosophy and is like, actually, so if I decide I want to make some kind of comment about biology and Cy Gart comes up to me and says, hey, I think this is kind of incorrect, and I say, I'm not really interested in talking about it, he's not some random person saying
Right.
he disagrees with me. He's a biologist.
Right. I mean, I'm nobody special, and I have no actual, obviously, qualifications, but I have established myself well enough in the communities as somebody who does know a little about this topic. I've been been asked to speak on this topic and so if I have qualified myself to the point where actual experts have said, yeah, well, Steve kind of knows what he's talking about on this, then I feel like I can have a decent conversation with Ricky on it. And so to just dismiss it seems a little bit much by saying, well, I'm going to talk about this topic, but you know what? I'm not going to talk about this topic if I get something wrong. Where's the accountability when you have a large channel or you have a large following?
Well, yeah, and also when you're talking to people who kind of make it that what they do is talking about topics. So, like, it's not like Ricky Gervais doesn't speak on this topic regularly, and it's not like Jacqueline Glenn doesn't speak about these topics
Right.
regularly. It's like the same reason why like it's bizarre for someone like Matt Dillahunty who speaks on these topics to not want to have a conversation with Steve about the topic if you're going to be talking about the topic.
That none of them do. None of them do, right? I mean, if for example, like well, I saw the audience.
Like I wouldn't expect them to talk to me.
That'd be fun.
That would be fun.
That'd be
I would
fun.
have a lot of fun.
But like,
But I wouldn't expect them to like if I went up, hey, I think you might be wrong about this. Can we discuss it? I wouldn't expect them to respond to me. I'm pretty much a random in that kind of situation, but you're not a random. Maybe they'd be more willing to talk to a random.
maybe you're safer than I am. But like, let's say like Trina Porter made a video because she loves making videos about me because she adores me and I adore her. But if she made a, hi Trina, hearts. So if she made a video and she made a mistake about agnosticism, I would just talk to her and say something in private to her. I think you messed up here. Blah blah blah. She didn't agree. Fine, move on. Whatever. But she doesn't have like 3 million followers or something like Ricky does. There's a different onus to be had there when you're putting out that much information on a large platform. But unlike Ricky, Trina would listen and go, okay, I really don't care, but whatever, Steve, your hair is fabulous. That's what her response would be. So, yeah, I get it. I understand. There's more important things in life like hair than agnosticism. I understand. But so when he says that they're not mutually exclusive, he's actually incorrect. They are mutually exclusive because there's two different positions. One is the position in philosophy that you believe that God does not exist, and then when you have no belief either way. Now, you could change semantically these words. We do know they're polysemous, and even if you adopt what's called the sensu lato definitions, like the atheist community of Ostracism, the problem you run into is then you're still saying agnostic deals with knowledge, where I have never found agnostic to be dealt with knowledge. Agnosticism is related to knowledge if you use it as an epistemological proposition, but that's not normative. So where is agnostic relating to knowledge? I've never read this anywhere. I've never seen it anywhere. I've never seen anywhere has agnostic be even remotely conjoined with knowledge. Agnostic has always been, when you're agnostic on P, it is the suspension of belief and or disbelief, either or both actually, and that you just reserve judgment on it and you don't evaluate the proposition. That's a second order belief. How is that relating to knowledge? When I say it's always been standard inside of philosophy or outside of philosophy. If you're agnostic on a proposition, if you're agnostic on something, you say, you know what, I don't care either way. I'm just agnostic on that topic. I have no belief on it either way. That's what it means. It's not anything related to knowledge. Would you agree so far, Chesh?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. There's a fringe way of using a term that, when applied to when you're talking about a specific scenario, yes, it could be applied that way, but that's not normally how the word is used, and that's essentially the thing you're running into right here with calling agnosticism about, or calling an agnostic about a knowledge claim.
Exactly. And I might as well just throw this up now before we get too much further. I'll just put this over. Yes, this is the Stanford Encyclopedia. Can you see this? I gotta probably blow it up a little bit. But if you go to Stanford, and I'm just using this as a reference, but you can find other ones. But it clearly says an agnostic is a person who has entertained the proposition that there is a God and believes neither that it is true nor false. Let me blow this up real quick for people so they can see it. This is Dr. Paul Draper, philosopher, atheist philosopher.
Feel free to look them up later on.
Yeah. So, there you go. Size matters.
Cool.
Yeah, just exactly. So you guys should be able to read this just fine. But and it says nowadays the term agnostic is often used when the issue is God's existence, which is ontological. God's existence is existential, which is ontology, to refer to those who follow the recommendation expressed in the conclusion of Huxley's argument. An agnostic is a person who has entertained the proposition that there is no God, there is a God, but believes neither that it is true nor false. Okay, and then it goes into why agnosticism is often defined both inside and outside philosophy, not as a principle, but as sort of a psychological state towards a proposition. Okay.
Call the Scummer for two says, new narrative, Steve is bullying David Brent.
Who's David Brent? Do I know? I don't know that name, Jeff.
You're bullying him by not knowing who he is.
Yeah. That
How
could
dare
be.
you?
Yeah, could be. So that's right there is very clearly stating that there is a difference to be had here. All right, so he goes on and says agnostics don't know if there's a God or not. Okay, well,
Knowing is about knowledge. No,
yeah.
it's about not having that
I mean,
knowledge.
it's not a false statement, right? I mean, if you
Opposite.
knew there was a God, you'd be a theist. If you knew there was no God, you'd be an atheist, right?
Yeah.
So that is not a false statement, but it's kind of vacuous. You know, I mean, atheists don't know if there's a God or not. Theists don't know if there's a God or not, unless they say, I'm a theist who believes that God exists. And I also make the claim, in addition to that, that God does exist, right?
Yeah, the difference between I believe that there's a God and I know that there's a God.
Right.
So
And one is
saying
a subset of the
I
other,
believe
though.
that God exists and I know that God exists. Or
Right. But
God
you start
does
out,
exist.
but you start off as a belief, right? So if a theist says, I believe God exists, right? They can modify that belief to say, not only do I believe it, but I'm going to go one step further and say that I actually know it, because knowledge is a subset of belief. You have to have belief before you can have knowledge in any belief first not theory of knowledge, justified true belief plus. There are issues with belief first positions. Okay, we know now there are Getty error issues, and there's always going to be epistemic luck issues, but it is still commonly accepted that these are the most common forms of theories of knowledge out there, like justified true belief. And under justified true belief, in order to know something, you have to believe it. So, yeah, agnostics don't know if there's a God or not, but so do neither do theist or atheist.
And just so we're aware, David Brent is the name of Ricky Gervais' character in The Office.
Oh, okay. I don't watch the show, but I know he was on The Office. Okay.
Well, it was on the UK Office, the original Office, and
Yeah,
then there was.
I listened to him in an
Oh
interview the
God,
other day on that.
what's that guy's name?
What?
Oh, that's gonna drive me crazy. The guy who plays that Ricky Gervais's character in the American version of The Office.
Oh,
Steve Carell. Ah,
Steve
I did
Carell.
it.
Yeah, Stephen Carell. Yeah. Okay.
I did it.
Yay. Cheshire had a thought. All right. So
I knew I could do it. I
I'm
believed in me the whole time.
so proud. I have so much faith in you. All right, so he goes on to
Eh,
say atheists don't believe that there's a God. Okay, well that's a true statement, but neither do agnostics, neither do apatheists. You really wanted to just squeeze and pigeonhole it. Neither do theological, not cognitivist or ichtheist. Okay, so those are true statements so far, but I don't think he's understanding the differentiation here, because atheists do not believe there's a God, but neither do agnostics. Failed in engineering, $5. So atheism is a knowledge claim or the state of not knowing? Neither. Cheshire, which is it? Well, I mean, it's neither, though. So what is atheism there normatively?
it's a belief that God does not exist.
Yeah. Yeah. It has absolutely no relationship to knowledge.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wouldn't even know why an atheist would argue such a thing. I don't understand Matt Dillahunty's position on that, or Jacqueline Glenn's position on that. Because why would you want to relate it to knowledge in any way, shape, or form? Because then you run into the same problem. Let's say Cheshire. Okay, Cheshire is would be considered to be a philosophical atheist.
This is why I'm here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna use her like I usually do, because I just use her and throw away when I'm done. I just hang up on her and I don't talk to her after that. So Chester, as a philosophical atheist, somebody who thinks that gods don't exist, they're all bullshit, blah blah blah. If that's the case, then somebody says, you know what, you can't be an atheist if that's your claim, because in order to do that, you have to know all things. And you don't know all things, therefore you cannot say that God does not exist. That's an argument that a guy named Braxton had put out a while ago, and that's one of the things I was talking about with the Friendly Atheist blog that I wrote.
Yeah.
And so that's a shitty argument. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very good argument for whatever the claim is that I'm making, because the claim I would be making in that case, if I was relating it, if I wanted to relate my claim to knowledge, I would say none of the gods that I've managed to look into so far, therefore I know none of these gods are true.
Yeah, and that's fine. You could claim local, local, like example.
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
localized knowledge.
Yeah, I say that I know Thor doesn't exist, right? Ocean will get all over that and go, well, how do you know that? And I'll go into this long diatribe about theories of knowledge and think that I'm justified to claim that as knowledge.
Right.
Because it's established mythos, right?
Yeah.
And once something is established mythos, then to me, you can claim it as a knowledge claim and successfully be able to do it. if you
Yeah.
accept certain theories of knowledge and you're not a Pyrrhonian or academic skeptic, because they don't believe knowledge exists, right? They hold the
Right, yeah, that's
position
a
that you
whole
can't have
different that
knowledge,
is a
right?
whole different discussion.
Whole
So
different
if I
discussion.
was to say that I don't based on the mythos, so like the Quran would be the mythos that I'm referring to, I would say based on this book of what people are telling me is true about this entity, I do not believe or I know this entity is not real because the stuff in the book doesn't comport with reality.
Yeah, and Jeff, you can come in anytime. You after I get through this, I know you had messaged me. You wanted to correct some stuff you had said in a previous video, and by all means, if you want to come into this hangout after I finish this, sure, dude. And Exploratory Minds Project, hey, buddy. And by the way, yeah, I don't. Have you told him not to mention what you've been talking about? Okay, good. We like to keep things secret. We like secrets around here.
Gonna be a surprise when
Yeah.
we're ready.
The things that like Cheshire and I do when we're off air, can't talk about. Shh, just let's see here. Okay, so moving on here. People are like, what do you guys do? What do you guys do?
How close can I get to the microphone without blowing somebody's ears out?
Why does it work better when you do that? When I do it like that, it just sounds weird.
It's because you're not
You're not doing it right.
Yeah, you're not doing it right.
How about that? Is that better? Hey, Manya. Manya, is this working for you, Manya?
Oh God, no!
No, it doesn't really. I know.
Okay, so listen to the change.
Manya's like, I'm so not coming back to this channel.
It's just a movement of where my voice is coming from. So normally when I'm speaking, I'm projecting, but if I move closer to the microphone, I start letting it hang out in my mouth instead of down in my gut. So I'm just sitting here talking like this, and then it's just really, really low.
This is
And I'm
Sunday
not actually-
school, so let's
I'm
not
not
get too creepy.
adding, but I'm not actually even adding any whisper. There's no air coming out. It's
Oh,
not like if I was whispering.
Oh,
it
so
would
you're
be like
you're
this, but I'm
talking.
not
You're just
actually.
talking
I'm
really
just it's
low.
really, really, really low. Yeah.
You're talking a little bit high in your Cheshire voice.
And sometimes I can talk like this, and it's really
You
hot
sound like a
in my
chip.
voice, and then I can talk about how I'm basically a fucking chipmunk.
Well, you about the size of one. Ink Boy, 2 pounds. Let's not forget that Steve doesn't exist. Yes, I have a whole blog on that too, Ink Boy. I actually did write a blog. I don't know if you read it, but I wrote a blog piece called "The Problem with Not Believing," and I go in and it's a little bit of polemics and a little bit of satire, but it's basically in a Jonathan Swift kind of way, mocking people that don't have any beliefs, that don't believe that I exist, because there was a few of them at some time. More than a few, actually. It was kind of disturbing for having a whole bunch of people that say, well, I don't believe that you exist, Steve. And it's like, really? I'm having an existential crisis now. Yeah. All right, so moving on. A very important point to make here is that atheism isn't a belief that no gods exist. It is a lack of belief that God exists. Oh, God. It's like, no, Ricky, just no.
We already went over this. We did this part already.
Yeah, it's fundamentally not the case, Ricky. He is parroting the whole American atheist and atheist curiosity narrative, which we have shown time and time again, is how they hold these words. They use these words that way. Nobody in academic and philosophy else uses it that way. Well, shouldn't say nobody, but it's very, very rare. If you go read the literature, you won't find it anywhere. Some people have argued for it. There's a paper by Stephen Bullivant in the Handbook of Atheism by Oxford that he argues for it. Michael Martin, who was a doctor, he argued for it. But other than those two, and Dr. Flew argued for it too. But other than that, they only argued for it. They still accepted the fact that
having an argument for something doesn't mean it gets adopted.
Right. Yeah. And so this thing that atheism isn't a belief that no God exists is fundamentally wrong, Ricky. You're just you but to put out such a thing is to me gross negligence. Now, what you could say
would be, where did he get this from? Is he
American Atheist.
Actually just quoting American Atheist, or did he read it somewhere else? So the question would be, cite your source, please, Ricky. Cite your source.
Well, cite an academic source. I mean, I don't care what American Atheists say. I have another blog on American Atheists showing how they just get crap wrong left and right. But what he should say this, a very important point to make here is that atheism in American atheism or the atheist community of Austin, how they use this term would be, and then, continue.
Yeah, there are atheists who use this term,
right.
period.
That would be a true statement.
Yeah, then you're actually narrowing it down rather than saying, oh, everybody does this. Atheism is this thing. Well, no, it's not. There's just a pocket of very loud people that exist somewhere in South USA, the southern states, that use the term in this manner, and
We
not
call it
everybody
Texas, by the way, Chesh. I know you're not familiar with the country here, but we call it Texas.
call it Texas.
That's okay. I don't know the difference between Saskatchewan and Alberta. I don't know.
It's because there isn't a difference. There's just an imaginary line.
It's Vancouver is on this side, and Nova Scotia is way over here. And I don't even know Nova Scotia is that like an independent entity too?
Nova Scotia is a province, yes.
It's a province. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is actual province. Yeah. All right. So moving on. So we all know that's completely wrong, Ricky.
Geography.
What's that?
I said geography.
Geography. I hate geography. All right. And then the most horrifying thing. We are all agnostic, i.e., no one knows if a God exists or not. Okay. This is so much wrong here.
It's not a knowledge claim.
Yeah, it's not a knowledge claim. When we're all agnostic, what he's saying is we all don't have a position on the proposition. He is saying this is a categorical statement, okay? Categorical statement with the modifier of all, right? So when you say all of P, you're saying that the entire set. So if I say all dogs are mammals, Spot is a dog, therefore Spot is a mammal. That is a categorical syllogism that's true because it's just deductive inference. So by him saying we're all agnostic, Cheshire, is we'll just say human. Cheshire is a human. All humans are agnostic. Cheshire is agnostic. Well, she's not agnostic though. She's
I'm
an
also
atheist.
not a human.
A goblin.
I am a goblin.
So that statement might fall apart for different reasons, but you get the idea. So he's relating it to knowledge. You want to read a super chat real quick?
Yeah, Godless Scummer for 5 says, Ricky Gervais, please come on the Non Sequitur show once it's officially back in the right hands. You'll be an ever so slight improvement on G-Man.
Right?
Oh, that's not nice. That's not nice at all. Although I would love to see if there was actually going to be this discussion had between Ricky Gervais on Non Sequitur and somebody, Scott Clifton.
Yeah, no. Scott, I don't know where Scott stands on any of this. I've never talked to him about it.
Oh my God, Scott Clifton, please come talk to us about this.
Yeah, I don't know where he stands on it. Matter of fact, I should have. I told Scott that I would actually, whenever I talk about these subjects, I would I tag him or send a private message to him.
You dick!
I forgot.
I'm on it. I'll do it. I'll do it right this second.
Well, no, I was going to send him a private message.
I'm just going to send it to him publicly because
why?
This can't stop me.
I was going to ask him if he wants to come hang out, but whatever.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I'm going to do.
Oh, okay. So Steve's talking about philosophy. Come hang out. It's Sunday.
Yo.
I like Scott. He's a good guy. Like I said, what's funny is I don't know crap about his acting stuff. I just don't care. I don't watch Bold and the Beautiful. I don't watch General Hospital. I know he plays like Dylan Quartermain. Doesn't matter a bit to me. I just want to talk to him about philosophy stuff because he's really good at this. For somebody who's has never really had any formal education on it, it's amazing because he's a lot like me. We're just self-taught kind of stuff. But okay. So he goes on to say, believers don't know if a God exists, but they believe in one anyways. Well, that's a harsh statement. Now, do I agree with him? Probably, right? I think it's a hard claim to really make, though. And the reason why is I don't think I believe that nobody knows if God exists or not. I will make the same claim as him, and I probably can justify it, right? But the problem is it's very difficult to do so, and it would take me very, very long writing out exactly why I hold that justification. And so, when a believer says, I know that God exists, I've never, in my experience, had one properly demonstrate to me that they are justified to hold that epistemic disposition of knowledge. Same thing with an atheist, though. When an atheist says, I know there are no gods, I've never had any of them successfully demonstrate to me that they are justified. Because the first question I asked them is what theory of knowledge you're using, and I don't think either one of them has ever given me an answer. If you say that I know this is the case and you cannot tell me what theory of knowledge you're using, I think you've already failed at premise one, like right out of the gate.
Right. Yeah, you can't formulate an argument when your premise is already falling apart. Just like how I immediately jumped on Steve's premise that Cheshire's a human, all humans are this, therefore blah blah blah.
Premise falls apart.
It falls apart at Cheshire's a human.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So let me ask the live chat. if I was asked any of you what theory of knowledge you to subscribe to, would any of you be able to give me one? And there's quite a few of them. Some of them more difficult, but I'm not going to name those difficult ones yet.
It would be easier to have people come on, describe how they think about something, and have Steve label it for you.
Yeah, ooh, that'd be hard. I think though, I would probably
Yeah.
need like Ozzy on for that.
It'd be interesting. What do you think I am, Steve?
Ozzy Light.
Ozzy Light.
Yeah.
Steve,
No.
what do you think I
Oh,
follow?
what do I think theory of knowledge you use?
Yeah.
I would probably say that you just go JTP.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Justified true belief. There's a justified true belief has tripartite conditions. 3 conditions for justified true belief is 1, the proposition must be true, the subject must believe the proposition, and the subject must be justified to believe the proposition. So if I say the proposition is all squares have 4 sides, you can say I know the proposition is true. And the reason why you can say I know the proposition is true is because, 1, it is true that all squares have 4 sides. You believe that all squares have 4 sides because you're not an idiot flat earther. And you are justified to believe that all squares have 4 sides because by definition, mathematically, by geometry, all squares have 4 sides. That is a knowledge claim that you can justify. Would you?
That sounds like me.
Okay. Does that make sense to the audience, that how easy it is to justify something like that?
So what we should do then is we should propose a question to the chat, let them think about it for a little while, then have Ozzy come on with you and let them comment on this video, and then we can look at some of them and bring them up later and tell people what, based on their answers to that 1 or 2 questions that we decide to pose, what you two would think that
well, I don't think they can just accidentally subscribe to some of the harder theories of knowledge.
Well, no, maybe not, but it will give them a starting point to be able to research it more and maybe understand themselves a little bit more.
Oh, but you know what? You reminded me of something. I had Isaac on the other day. Ask yourself, right?
Yep.
And I forgot to talk to him. There was a thing about what's called a biconditional, and G-Jump got his biconditionals all wrong. Oops. And a biconditional is basically P implies Q, Q implies P. Basically saying that the example like the example I just used. As a matter of fact, that's what reminded me. All squares have 4 sides, or all squares have 4 equal sides, and an object with 4 equal sides is a square. Those are biconditional. One implies the other. You cannot have one with the other. P, Q, Q, P, right?
Right.
So he was asking one time, like, what is biconditional? And it was just confusing Tom, because Tom had said, he's an expert in logic. And I'm like, look, if you're claiming you're an expert in logic and you can't answer something about a biconditional, I wouldn't put you in the expert category. I'm not an expert in logic. I'm not even what I consider to be a novice in logic. I have an understanding of the basic things of logic, like 101. I have the fundamentals of logic pretty good, I guess. But that's it. Fundamentals, like first year shit. Okay, so don't ask me to do your proof for you. I won't be able to do it. But if you can say you're an expert in something like T-Jump does, don't you think you should like have 101 down?
Exactly.
How can you be an expert and not know 101 stuff?
Yeah, well, if you're going to claim that you're an expert, you need to be able to actually back that up. But I can also understand when you're an expert in something, sometimes remembering like in biology, you can be an expert in biology and not really remember that when you're taught it in high school, the basics that you're taught are actually incorrect.
Oh, that's true. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's this thing called what is it called? Heuristic learning.
Yes.
And
Or you
heuristic
could
way
be
is approaching it is basically, look, this is not exactly true, but
we need you to understand this to be able to
Exactly.
evolve your knowledge and expand it further, so that way you have this understanding, and even though it's inaccurate, it's at least going to give you a place to start from.
Yep.
That's exactly what I'm suggesting with the chat. If they want to find out where they might fall on this, on how they actually, what their epistemological stances are, then you could give them, it might not be 100% accurate, but it gives them a starting point of being able to learn and be like, okay, well, I've looked into it more and I don't really think I fall into this, and why or why not. And then it gives people a starting point.
Yeah, like for example, a lot of time, I don't know if you had calc or not, but like one of the things in calc is you basically you power rule stuff, right? So take a derivative. If I say 2x squared, you basically take the exponent, you move it down to the coefficient, or you times it by the coefficient, and then you subtract 1. So there's a formula for the power rule, which is n minus 1 for the exponent, and then So basically, if I say 2x squared, I take the derivative. 2 times 2 is 4, so I end up with 4x because 2 minus 1 is 1, and x to the first is x. So there's something you just use, right? And we'll tell you, just use this, right? You don't have to derive it. You don't have to even understand why it works that way until you go into higher level calcs.
You don't even have to go all the way to calc. You can just go into trigonometry. In high school, they don't treat you they don't actually teach you what cosine and tan are. They just tell you to use them in the calculator.
Yeah, well, the same principle. If you like pre-calc, if you say, look, or if I say, what's the derivative of cosine, they'll tell you it's negative sine x. Okay, they'll tell you, but you don't derive it till later on.
Yeah,
right?
You don't know what it means.
You don't have to
learn
prove
the
it.
formula first, and
Right.
then you can go back and deep dive and learn a little bit more about what like in math class, they don't teach you what a number is. They show you what a number represents. So like
That's
this is
true.
1 glass of water. They don't actually tell you what the number 1 means or what that means for like the larger things, and you don't learn that until like.
Yeah, I don't think you really even get into it unless you get into real abstract mathematics.
Yeah, you actually have to go into that to ever
real
actually
analytics is
learn
called.
about it. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, they don't teach you what a number actually is.
Yeah, I had calc in college, and I had calc in nuke school, and I didn't learn really about real analysis until 4 years ago. And I just had a lot of math people that I was around, maybe a little longer, but the real analysis was quite a bit different than what you learn in school. I mean, I knew some of the basics, but
the same thing might apply to philosophy. So T-Jump might not ascribe to the basics because he's so far beyond.
Oh God.
Just to wrap that back around.
There's certain basics that are just so basic, though. That's like saying somebody says they have a medical degree and they don't know the difference between the brain and the heart. There's some fundamental stuff, I think. But
it's like saying I am advanced in math, but I don't know that 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. So I just thought it was funny. Kind of a little segue there. Okay, so atheists don't know if a God exists or not. So, well, again, now he's making some mistakes too. There are atheists who claim they know God does not exist. Okay, I've met them. They do exist. Now, it's not a constituent part of atheism, right? It's not a necessary condition to be an atheist.
Yeah, I would
it is sufficient, but not necessary. Well, no, wait, hang on. It's not necessary because you don't have to know P to be an atheist. But
right.
Would it be okay? Let me think about this for a sec. Go ahead.
Well, what I would say is that I ascribe to being an atheist, but I wouldn't make the claim that I know God doesn't exist, because I would believe that somebody could describe God in some abstract way that I would be like, okay, well, maybe. Sure, I guess, but it's not relevant to me, and it doesn't really follow along with any kind of day-to-day life, so I wouldn't see how it would matter. So I would still ascribe to being an atheist, but I wouldn't make the claim that I wouldn't follow the claim that no God exists,
right?
Because I think you could probably come up with some kind of definition.
But if you did, let's say you made the claim that no gods exist. Mm-hmm. By any stretch of the imagination, you're an atheist. How could you not be unless you... Though there's only way you're not is if you use the semantic argument that T-Jump uses, then it's questionable, because T-Jump's argument is such that you can actually be a theist, believe God exists, and still be an atheist. It's bizarre. So
yeah, that is bizarre.
Yeah, his semantical arguments are just... They're not... By the way, they're not illogical. They're just bizarre because they don't really give you any real utility. But...
Sure.
But other than that, how is it that you can have a position where you say, I know there are no gods, and somebody says, well, you know what, though? You're not an atheist. It would be like, what? How are you not an atheist by any measure?
I would imagine you would start running into problems where you're like, well, I don't believe that there are gods, but I believe... but I know that these stories happened. So if you were to take Zeus, you could have knowledge. You could think that you know that Zeus is real, but not ascribe godhood to them.
Sure.
So maybe if you start going along that kind of line of thinking, you might be a theist but also an atheist at the same time.
Well, I have an argument where you can be a theist and atheist due to semantics when you use some of these.
Well, that wasn't semantic.
Terminologies.
That wasn't a semantic argument I just made, though. That was knowledge and belief based. So you could have knowledge that Zeus exists, but not believe him to be a god, or not ascribe godhood to him. So in which case you're a theist and an atheist at the same time.
Yes, I can see your point on that. In which case it's not. I mean, it is semantic in a way only because you're defining.
Kind of. It depends on, you're changing the
non-god.
definition of God. Yeah. You're saying that, you know what, I would ascribe that there was this person who had all of these powers, but I'm not going to ascribe God, or I'm not going to believe they're a god.
He was a metahuman.
They don't. Yeah, because they're not powerful enough, because as far as I'm concerned, God has to be omnipotent or all powerful, which Zeus was not.
Yeah, just because you're supernatural doesn't mean you're a god. I see your argument there. That's actually pretty good. How'd you get so smart, Chesh? Stop it. I don't like it. Okay.
I was born this way.
Can you read Intrigue Feline's question? Because that is a great, brilliant question, and I'd like to answer it for her.
How can you be any of the three if you are not aware of the position? You cannot. Why did you just say that you can be an atheist without knowing the P?
All right, so that's a great question.
Explains, oh my God, we're going to get in so much trouble. We're talking about the P.
The P. The P. How do you know P?
Speaking of the P.
How'd you know it was P, Steve? How'd you know it was P, Steve? Oh, wait, because you said it multiple times?
No. Okay, explain your thing. I'll be right back. I got to go do
the same. When people talk about P a lot, you kind of know P. Okay, so yeah, there's a position out there at Intrigue Feline called innocent. Dr. Graham Oppie, who's an atheist philosopher, talks about this in his book Atheism and Agnosticism. Great book. It used to be free. I don't know how long it is, but I got it when it was free to download. It was great read. But he argues, actually he didn't argue, he kind of just stipulates it, but I mean, whatever. But he says that if you are unaware of the proposition, then you're considered to be innocent toward that proposition. That's your epistemic disposition. So you're not suspending judgment on that proposition. You're not agnostic. To be agnostic, like I said, there's three main epistemic dispositions toward a proposition. There's believes P, disbelieves P, and suspends judgment on P. Where disbelief P is basically the exact same thing as saying believes not P. So if I say I disbelieve you, that is in logic and philosophy is saying I believe that it's false. Okay, it's not saying I just merely don't believe you. It's saying that is false. Disbelief is belief of negation. I have many citations for that. It should be something that seems to be, to me, uncontroversial and indubitable. But there are people out there, a few of them. I even corrected Arn on this, by the way. This is one thing I did get to correct Arn on, and he changed his position on it. So if Arn changes his position on it, anybody says you disbelief is merely saying I don't believe you, they're fundamentally wrong. I mean, it does mean that I don't believe you, because that's entailment. So if I say I believe you're wrong, that does entail I don't believe you, does it not? But it's not merely I do not believe you. I can say I do not believe you. That does not by necessity mean that I disbelieve you. It just means that I don't believe you. It's called unbelief. Okay, so when somebody's not aware of the proposition feline, that just means that they are innocent towards that proposition. That's why they don't have to be able to value. Now, she says, why did you just say that you can be an atheist without knowing the P? Well, you're conflating two different things. It's not knowing about the P. It's knowing as a position towards P. So if I say I know P, that means I am saying I know P to be true. It doesn't mean that I have knowledge of P. Two different things. If I say to somebody, hey, Cheshire, do you believe that gurgle gurgles exist? And she says, I have no knowledge of that. What she's saying is that she doesn't know what the hell that is.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So that doesn't mean she doesn't know P. Right?
It means that I'm unaware of it.
It means she's unaware of it and she doesn't know of P. But if I say, do you believe gurgle girls exist? And she says, I know they don't exist. She's telling me then she knows that they do not exist as a true statement. And then assuming that she would have to at that point know what a gurgle girl is, So yeah, there's a difference between knowing of P and knowing P. Would just say I know P, that is saying that P is true, that I've believe P, and then I'm justified to. Basically, that's called knowing that P is what they say instead. So instead of saying knowing P, it's knowing that P.
I can give you a knowledge claim right now. I definitely feel better after getting rid of P.
Yeah. We all like to pee. We all like a good pee, don't we? Yeah. Oh, she says, I meant that of it being aware of the proposition. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify. But yeah, so if you're not aware of the proposition, then yeah, you're innocent on it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Atheists don't know if a God exists or not, so without evidence, they choose not to believe a God exists. Well,
Belief isn't
go
a
ahead, you do
choice.
this
Haven't we
one.
been over that? Have we not been over that belief is not an option? If you have knowledge of something, you can't choose to not believe it later. Like it's like if my house is on fire and I can see my house on fire and my house burns down, I can't later then choose to believe that my house didn't burn down. I have the knowledge that my house burned down.
Right.
That's not gonna fly. Now what I could do, I guess, is get some kind of memory issue or some kind of brain problem that means I no longer remember, which means I don't have that information anymore. I don't have the knowledge to know that my house burned down.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
This shit makes no sense. This is the thing so far that he has said that has made the least amount of sense to me.
well, yeah, because I mean, most of us probably, whether we realize it or not, we adhere to what's called dostastic involuntarism, and what that is basically we don't choose our beliefs. Because if I said, "Hey, I'll give you $1 million for you to will yourself to believe you can fly," no matter how hard you try, you cannot believe that you can fly. Beliefs are formulated in the brain, and
that's
then we
why
become
Peter
aware of them
Pan
afterwards.
works the way it does. They can't fly unless they believe that they can fly and think happy thoughts. And it doesn't work for them until they see Peter fly and they know it's possible. So now they have knowledge that in fact they could fly if they follow these steps, and then they therefore believe that they could then fly, and so they fly.
Yeah, and I like the
How
fact.
does Disney do this better?
How does Disney do it better than Ricky? So I don't like I said, there are atheists that they do claim knowledge, but then you can go after them that. But I don't like that it says without evidence. Here's the thing: we have beliefs all the time without evidence. This narrative that atheists use every so often, that you can never believe something without evidence. Well, why not? Look, I believe that I believe that reality is external to the mind. I believe that. That is an unjustified belief.
There are beliefs that you have to you basically you have to believe this thing because there is no other choice. Never go full solipsism. Never go full solipsism.
Yeah, I mean that's the only other option, right? And so it's a pragmatic. There's a pragmatic reason why I choose to believe it, but there's no evidence that the universe and reality is external to the mind, because any evidence that the universe is external to the mind is also evidence that it's internal. They're equal. There's no one better than the other. Now, there are some newer papers out there that tend to argue from pragmatism. They're very complicated. I don't fully understand them. They're brand new. They came out like last year, but I try to get through them. Couldn't much do it. But I understand they are trying to get around Hume's induction by using pragmatism and some other stuff, but it's not the same thing as saying, well, like, for example, induction will work tomorrow, and the uniform of nature will be the same tomorrow, and I'm justified to believe that because we use it. That's not a justification.
When you choose to drive a vehicle, like if you were to never believe anything without being pragmatic, or you would never be able to get anywhere in life, because you would have to then be you'd be in a situation where you would never know whether or not the floor is going to fall out from underneath you. You would never know whether or not like Inception would start happening and the room's going to start spinning around. We have to live by expectations that what happened the day before is going to happen, but that's not how things work. Actually, you can't necessarily justify the fact that if I close the door, then the room behind me no longer exists.
Yeah.
I can't prove to you without going to that room. And every time I open that door, I have no evidence that it's actually going to be there.
But the evidence is the same. I could open the door, I see the room. The evidence is there's a room, but how do I know that it's not in my mind? As exposed external.
Exactly.
The evidence is the same.
Then you run into solipsism.
Then you run into solipsism, right? A hard form of solipsism.
Yeah.
So yeah, we hold properly based beliefs as unjustified but rational. So.
Called the scummer. My ex-girlfriend is a solipsist. When she broke up with me, she said, "It's not you, it's me."
Yeah.
Oh, I'm out of water.
Aw.
Am I though? Do I know that?
Yeah. So that doesn't make any sense there. That what he says.
Puck is upset.
Ricky Gervais, you pissed off Puck. All right, moving on. But that one is pretty egregious, yeah. So he says, yet if they were presented with evidence, they of course would have to believe. Well, not necessarily. That's kind of odd too. People can evaluate evidence and come to not a position on a proposition. They can say, well, I still don't have enough evidence to convince either way. A lot of people, like aliens, Some people just don't have a position on it. They're agnostic on the existence of aliens. I think there's enough evidence by the Drake equation to warrant a belief that some kind of a life exists out there in the universe other than us. I do hold that belief, but I believe it on rationalism, not empiricism. I believe it on things like the Drake equation, the fact that we've seen life exist under certain conditions. And so I think that there's a probability that's higher that life does exist out where, in the universe than just us. Because if life just exists here, to me, that's a greater mystery than life being ubiquitous in the universe. So just because you have evidence doesn't mean that they, of course, would have to believe. And to say something along the lines of, yet, if they're provided with sufficient evidence to believe, they, of course, would have to believe, is actually a tautology in some ways. It's at least a vacuous, because to say that I believe, when you say, and I wrote a blog on this, when an atheist says, I don't believe there's a God because there hasn't been presented to me sufficient evidence to convince me there's a God, that's not saying anything informative. It's repeating the same thing. All those are equivocal statements. I don't believe means I don't have sufficient reasons to believe. That's what it means. I mean, they're to me, they're coextensial things, right? If you don't believe something, it means, well, I shouldn't say that. You don't believe without holding one of the other positions, because you can believe and you say, I don't believe God exists, and actually hold the position that gods don't exist. But when you're saying, I merely do not believe, I just don't believe, but I have no belief either way, it's vacuous to say the reason why you don't have a belief either way is because you haven't been presented evidence that's sufficient enough to convince you, because it's self-evident. Because if you had, you of course would believe. It's a vacuous statement. A lot of people have a hard time understanding that argument, but I think it's a pretty sound argument. I've ran it by philosophers, and they don't seem to have a problem with it.
I kept trying to jump in, and I realized I was muted. Okay. I think there's also something to be said for whether or not you understand the evidence that's being presented. So if I give you a mathematical equation as to what, like, for example, aliens, whether or not life exists outside our planet, there is a high probability that, yeah, because it's so large and enough time has passed, that there will be other life other than us. But at the same time, there's another mathematical equation that you can use to demonstrate how, because of these exact same reasons, why we should have already run into life. And we haven't.
Yeah,
so you can,
exactly.
But
That's
whether or not you actually understand those
Fermi
equations
paradox.
and whether, exactly.
Yeah.
And whether or not you actually understand how they're applied, you can actually come to opposite conclusions using the exact same information. It's just a matter of how you interpret that information sometimes.
I actually agree with you on that, yeah. So do you believe there's aliens or not?
I think that there's a problem with being able to recognize life. We're so used to one very specific thing being considered life or not life, even though there is some gray area in there. But I think it's very possible that what we would come across in space could be so alien to us that we wouldn't even recognize it as life.
I completely agree with that. But the question would be then, do you actually believe there, though, is some type of life out there, even though it's not something that we may or may not recognize? Although I think that we would recognize it to some degree, because if life we know life is based upon certain fundamental things. We know it's based upon DNA. We know it's based upon amino acids. We know it's based upon proteins. We know it's based upon cells. We know there's certain things that are fundamental for life to exist. Water has to exist for life to exist.
For our kind of life, yeah.
For our kind of life. We have never seen any other type of life but those types of life that's based upon certain fundamental things, and with
the way we classify, that's because we classify it, and we classify it based on our local information, right? It's
like respiration, mobility,
exactly,
yeah,
right. So we classify life based on our experience with life, but that's not to say that other life can't exist that we would not classify as life. Now, we might have to come up with another category entirely to classify it.
Well, would they be sentient? Because
if we were able to, that's the thing. So if you want me to answer the question, I would say that life is inevitable.
Life finds a way. Life finds a way.
Yeah, life finds a way. It has to. We might never run into it, and just because of time and space and the limited amount of time that we have that we've been looking. But I would say that if you have enough time, eventually life is going to happen. It has to.
Yeah, and it might, and I agree with you. I think we might find things that are like triple helix DNA or some other kind of things that are similar to DNA, but not quite DNA, based upon other types of chemical things. Absolutely, we have no way until we go to those other planets. We don't know this. This is how it developed here, right? But if that's the case, the universe is much, much more mysterious place than any of us could ever imagine. Of how many different ways life could have occurred. It just happened to occur this way on this planet.
Plus,
so, yeah,
tardigrades are everywhere, man.
They exist on the planets.
Yeah. Everywhere. Tardigrades don't give a shit.
I think tardigrades were actually probably ancient astronauts that came here from their home planet a long time ago.
Tardigrades are the honey badgers of the universe.
Yeah. Send them as probes.
But that's just my opinion, and what the fuck do I know?
No, I think I definitely agree with you on most of that. All right, so moving on here. Yeah, if they were okay. So, in fact, it wouldn't even be belief anymore. It would be knowledge. Well, no, Ricky. If you presented evidence to convince you that God exists, that's not a knowledge claim. That's a belief claim.
Somebody's asking why you're mispronouncing Ricky Gervais's name. It's because he can't pronounce it.
Ricky Gervais. I've been saying it
there
right.
You go.
Well, actually, I listened to him. He says there's 3 different ways people say it. I listened to him before I did this. Ricky Gervais is how he says it. But he says there are other ways to pronounce it. But Ricky Gervais is how he prefers it. But he doesn't care.
I have to go chase the dog out. He's not supposed to be up here. And he snuck up.
All right.
And he's super cute, and I don't want to kick him out.
All right, so he presents this as a fact. In fact, it wouldn't even be belief anymore. It'd be knowledge. Well, no, if you present evidence to convince somebody that there's a God, how does that automatically entail knowledge? That just means that they're convinced there's a God. That's not a knowledge claim. If I say I am convinced aliens exist, I believe aliens exist, I make the claim aliens exist, that's not a knowledge position. That is a belief position. But again, I'm claiming it to myself, not to other people. If some of these people said, hey, Steve, you believe aliens exist, what's your evidence for that? Demonstrate to me. I'd tell them to fuck off. I have no obligation to tell them why I have belief that aliens exist, unless I'm trying to persuade them. If I say, hey, look, in Trade Fiegeline, aliens exist, and I could convince you or try to convince you that aliens exist. I have evidence that aliens exist. Then I have an onus. To say, okay, here's my burden of proof. Here's my burden of justification. Here's my reasons why aliens exist. And I would be like, here's my evidence, the Drake equation. Now, the Drake equation isn't a empirical, but it's something we can observe, but we can, in a way we can observe I guess we can observe the variables that go in the Drake equation, but it's not like we can look at it and say, okay, there's a planet, there's life on it, therefore aliens exist. We are using a mathematical probability based upon observations of habitable zones, how many planets there are in the universe, life expectancies of civilizations. Ozzy says, by the way, welcome Ozzy. It's been a while. Ozzy's been so busy fishing and iglooing and doing all the fun stuff that we all should be doing. It would appear that Gervais doesn't seem to recall any of the philosophy he studied as an undergrad, or perhaps he never learned any epistemology and philosophy of religion. I don't know. I know that he likes this topic, Ozzy, but the thing with this, Oz, is that it's not so much what Ricky has said or Jacqueline Glenn has said or Hemet has said. The problem I'm having, Ozzy, is that these people have very large platforms, and there doesn't seem to be any accountability when they say things that are categorically can be shown to be demonstrably false. That's the issue I have. Ricky has 3 million people on Twitter, and I don't give a crap about punching up. You know that. Most people would recognize that. I care that he has said certain things that I fundamentally disagree with. They're going to show that he's incorrect on. And Jacqueline Glenn has the same issue. She went on the Rubin Report. She has a pretty big channel. She doesn't want to correct anything. And that's the problem I'm finding, is that they think there's no... they have impunity to what they've said, and I don't like that. I mean, especially when you have a bigger platform, I think you have a more of a responsibility to make sure that when you're putting something out as quote fact, you get a little more correct, because a lot of people now take this, and it makes it much harder for somebody else to come in and say, wait a minute here, no, wait, that isn't fact. I mean, let's say that it was about philosophy, Ozzy. Let's say that this was about biology, medical. And, and he's not a medical doctor, but let's say, he says, is a medical fact, blah, 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 blah. And these doctors, all of them go, wait, no, Ricky, you're wrong on this. You're putting out misinformation about medicine and medical stuff. And he doesn't care. He doesn't fix it. What's the difference? I don't see a difference. when you have that large of a platform and you're putting out misinformation, I think it's I think it's I don't want to say morally reprehensible, but it's questionably moral. That's my position on it. You know, I don't know how Ozzy feels about it, but that's why I'm arguing about this, Ozzy, right now. Is that I think that when you have a large body of people that listen to you, so yeah, anti-vaxxers the same thing. I was thinking about the same thing. Anti-vaxxers, same thing. They don't want to fix their crap, right?
It's irresponsible at the very least. You could probably even argue that it's morally irresponsible.
I would. I absolutely argue it's morally responsible. And so we're going to try.
So it might not be evil and it might not be malicious, but it's irresponsible.
I would love to have Ricky and Jack and Glenn and Hammett back, because he's been on the Non-Sequitur show before. I'd love to have them for a discussion. And again, I wouldn't care if it's off air either. My best discussions happen off air with people. I have a lot of off air discussions about philosophy with people, and I enjoy it. It's not about punching up. It isn't about who you are. It is about the topic and the fact that somebody like Ricky, who does have a large audience, is, I think, misleading people. So, all right. So moving on.
Negligence. Yeah, negligent would be
negligent would be good, Letty.
A good word, yeah.
I agree. All right. So moving on here. So you shouldn't ask the question, does God exist? Because everyone would answer it, I don't know. Okay. Oh, God. I got to breathe. Help me, Chesh.
All right, let's take this one bit at a time. Yeah, you breathe for a second. So you shouldn't ask the question, does God exist? Because everyone would answer, I don't know. Okay, well, incorrect. That is a really malformed sentence.
This is what Matt Dillahunty got upset by, too. Remember that flow chart I did?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I got to find again.
You should scroll it up a little bit so it's easier for people on the outside to read.
Scroll it up a little.
Yeah. Because we're moving on to the next paragraph, so you want to...
Oh, okay. Well, that's going to be a little bit of that. Okay. Yeah, Matt Dillahunty got upset by that because he says, well, Steve, first thing on that flow chart was, does God exist? And he was pissed that I didn't start with a preposition, which, by the way, I did get into proposition. The only mistake, it wasn't even a mistake, but the only thing I wish I would have changed on that, because I can't find the diagram now, is I would have been the one part where I said something about, I think I called it doxastic nihilism or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or something, I should have called it doxastic nihilism or limitivism. Limitivism, I think, would have been probably the better term to use, which is about, that we don't have beliefs. But other than that, the first part about epistemology, I have not had anybody try to refute that. And for Matt Dillahunty to just dismiss it arbitrarily by saying, oh, well, Steve shouldn't have asked that question. That question, does God exist, is the great debate question. It has been the great debate question since time before time, since long before the great debate community. The
question has existed.
That is the question for thousands of years.
A lot of philosophy is predicated on it.
Right.
So, to say you shouldn't ask the question is saying we shouldn't talk about philosophy, which is a bizarre kind of position to take. Now, he's not saying philosophy on the whole, but it's almost like he's separating out philosophy and religion. Like, it's fine to talk about philosophy, but don't talk about philosophy when you're talking about religion, because I see that a lot, and it's like, I don't think people understand that religion is philosophy.
Oh, yeah. And he's also seriously conflating epistemology with ontology, because this is an ontological question, right? It's an existential question. So it's asking, does God exist? Now, theists will say yes, right? Because they believe God exists. They're going to answer that question yes, right? Would you agree?
Well, yeah.
Okay. But are they making a knowledge claim by doing that?
No, they're making
Clearly
a
not.
claim.
Clearly not. Right? Now, the I don't know here is called ordinary doubt. This is where I think Hammett made a mistake too, and some other people, if I remember correctly. When you're talking about ordinary doubt, like I don't know how to answer that question, you're basically saying, agnostic would say, does God exist? And I'd say, well, I don't know how to answer that question because I have no position on the proposition. I don't have a belief either way. But a theist does know how to answer it. They say, yes, God exists. What?
Have you stopped beating your wife? It's the agnostic version of that question.
Well, no, that's that's a problem there, because have you stopped beating your wife is called a complex question fallacy, or
right. And what I'm saying is, towards an agnostic, the question, does God exist, God, yeah, it's taking out the guilt part, but it's does God exist is the same kind of question. Whereas I don't know how to answer your question because your question doesn't apply to what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't comport with what my position even is.
Okay, but you're a philosophical atheist, so you're an atheist. So if I said, "Does God exist?" How would you answer?
I would probably ask, which God are you talking about?
No, then so that's the problem. When you start
Yeah.
doing that, you get in local. This is clearly a global question.
That's what I mean. Because if that is your response, because generally if we're talking like I'm having this discussion with average Joe Schmo. Average Joe Schmo is asking me this question with baggage. They're not asking me this question as a philosopher on an overarching thing. And that's who Ricky Gervais is talking to. So you need to keep in mind that he's not talking to philosophers about this. He's talking to the average everyday person. And the average everyday person is who comes to me and says, does God exist? Then I'm going to ask, what are you talking about? Like, are you because I need not because I'm trying to push the question back on them, but because I'm trying to understand where this person is coming from.
And I get why you would do it, but
answer the
question. Let's take it straight out. Does God exist? That essentially is asking the question. Ontologically speaking, is the state of affairs such that there exists a God somewhere in the universe, or is the universe? You want to go pantheism?
Yeah, I would say. I don't know. It's possible.
Well, no. You wouldn't, because you hold the position there are no gods. You are an atheist. You would if you to be consistent, you would have to answer that question. No.
I don't think I would, because I would probably say that I would say no to any of the gods that I've been presented.
That's the problem with a lot of the atheists do. They try to change the question.
Yeah, that's why I'm not trying to change. What I'm trying to say is that essentially that at the end of the day, not like based on my own reasoning, I can say Thor doesn't exist, Zeus doesn't exist, the Quran's not true, the Christianity doesn't comport with reality, so I don't believe that God exists either. But if you recall what I said earlier, is like it is possible that you could define God in such a way that I would agree with you that yes, that God exists.
Does or doesn't?
Does.
Okay.
So if you were
but that's defining into existence. I don't want to do that. But real quick,
I'm more saying that like if you were to not necessarily define. This is the thing. God means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
I get that, but that's
so you run into a problem, right?
I kind of disagree there, and I'll tell you why in a second. Feline says, I'm still grinning about you having to think over the position of apathetic agnostic. Actually, I had that position 3 years ago, Feline. I used to actually say I was apatheistic, apatheistic, agnostic, theological, and cognitivist, and there's reasons for that. I'm no longer a theological and cognitivist after I've understood the position better, but I'm still apathetic agnostic, and the reason why I tend to apathetic agnosticism is that mainly because online I don't care so much if God exists or not. What I'm trying to care about is the topic of discussion. Right? I mean, yes, I do actually care if God exists or not. If God did exist, I'd like to know one way or another. I do like to. So I'm not apathetic as that I just don't care whether he exists or not. I'm apathetic as I just don't care whether God exists or not with respect to the conversations, because I just don't think it gets you anywhere. Nobody's ever going to show in a debate God existing or not existing. It's just never going to happen. At least not anytime soon.
I find God is more of a thought experiment more than anything else.
Yeah, it's fun conversation. But here's the thing. Again, does God exist? An atheist would say no. A theist would say yes, and the agnostic says, well, I have no position either way.
Yeah, so yeah, what I would end up saying is I would say no, God doesn't exist. And then if the conversation goes from there, then yeah, you might be able to say that, okay, if I present to you this kind of God, I might be like, yeah, okay, I guess, but I don't see how it's relevant.
Yeah.
Would be
okay. All right. So
where I would end up falling.
Moving on. Ask the question: do you believe a God exists? Well, that's a different question.
Yes, that's a very different question.
Yeah, that's a very different question. Do you believe a God exists? And by the way,
I
put this in my flow chart if I'm not mistaken. Because if I ask Chess, let me ask you the question: do you believe God exists?
No.
Okay. Ask me the question.
Do you believe God exists?
No. Oh.
Whoa.
We both have that same position, yet she's an atheist and I'm an agnostic. How is that possible? Because they're both non-theistic positions.
Yeah.
Both of them are under the category or the set of all things that are not theist. Because if you have a P or not P, which is by law excluded middle. If a proposition has to be true or false.
I catch the ball and I throw the ball to who? Naturally. I throw the ball to who? Naturally. Same as you.
Who's on third base? I don't know. So if I instantiate P with theist, I get theist or not theist. So there's a category of theist. So anything that's a theist would fall into that group. So we'll take like S.J. Thomason. She's a theist, right? She falls in the set. She's an object in the set of all things theist. I'm not a theist. I fall into the set of all things that are not theist or not theist. Okay, so Chester and I both fall in the set of non-theists. But the non-theist is a very nondescript word. It really doesn't really have much utility except for the fact it tells somebody that they're not a theist. It doesn't really tell you about what their beliefs are.
It's taking like here's the circle of theists and everything outside of that circle. That doesn't mean that this thing over here is the same as this thing. It just means neither of the things are this thing.
So when I say, do you believe that a God exists? And the atheist says no. Well, okay. But so the agnostic says no as well. The apatheist would probably say no, or they actually say no, I don't care. But there's a lot of positions that would say no. So yes, it is true that atheists say no. You could argue that
there's probably some brand of theist out there that would say no because they don't believe in a God by that kind of terminology.
No, they could not. That would be a contradiction.
Okay, then my question would be then if you believe in an ideal, like instead of like a God as in like
omnigod,
an entity, but an ideal, but you might still consider yourself a theist in that regard. Would you not? Or could
well, that's the problem with T-Jump's argument. Remember, I wish I knew the guy's name, but he was arguing about theism and saying, well, according to your use of these terms, T-Jump, that atheism is merely someone who doesn't believe there are good reasons to believe in God. A theist who believes God exists but agrees there's no good reason to, they do so what would be called unjustifiably. There's something called rational theism, but theism itself is an unjustified position, but they still believe in God. And he pointed out to T-Jump that theist who believes there's a God would, under your definition of atheism, be an atheist. And T-Jump's like, yeah. Then what the hell?
What's the point?
What's the point? Yeah. He's taking away from the way we talk about things, and it just makes no sense to do that because now you have a theist who believes in God, you're calling an atheist. What? And so, for him to say, the atheists say no. Okay, well, so what? Here's the thing: if you answer that question no, that is a necessary condition to be an atheist, but it is not a sufficient condition to be atheist. So all atheists would answer that question no, but not all who answer no are atheist.
Yeah, so it takes more than one.
You guys can see my camera over here. See? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's more. Essentially, there's more than one like you need to check more than one box off to fall under said category. And
Correct.
If you don't check off these boxes, you don't fit in this category. But if you check off two of these boxes and not the third one, you could fall under both.
Well, you could make it into one box. If the box is
there
are no gods, like check, you're atheist.
you could definitely put it up, but there are other boxes that you could tick that would put you in different categories.
So he goes on to say,
good. If you want to put it in D&D terms, because of course I want to put it in D&D terms.
Do your chaotic neutral stuff.
A cleric could be considered a healer because they have healing spells. They're not the only class that has healing spells. Bard has healing spells. A ranger can have healing spells. Paladins have healing spells, but they're not all considered a healing class. And depending, you could have a bard who does have healing spells, but because the majority of their spells are not healing spells, they would not be considered a healer. But you could have a bard that is based around healing, so therefore they would be a healing class of bard.
So all clerics are healers, but not all healers are clerics. Yeah. Amazing how that works. Yeah, I know. I mean, by the way, just because you can heal doesn't make you a healer, right?
You could also be a giant dick of a cleric and take none of the healing spells and just be a badass tank motherfucker.
I guarantee it. If you think any healing, if you just because you have a healing ability is a healer, go try doing a raid with somebody who has like one small self healing spell.
Go do a raid you'll be the healer of a raid when you're the ranger.
Yeah, but I've got arrows that heal +3. Okay. All right, so moving on here. Believers say yes, and agnostics are forced to make a decision. Wait. The agnostics are forced to make a decision? Actually, the agnostic is the one that's saying we don't have a decision on it. I'm confused by that statement.
The
The agnostic would say no to that question. Do you believe a God exists? No to that question.
What's a paladin?
I don't understand how he's. You either believe or you do not believe, right? So if you have the proposition of God exists, right? So ontologically speaking, God exists or God does not exist. It's one or the other. I think everybody kind of agrees with that. I mean, I don't know how else I don't know how you can say that's not the case. There is a God or there is not a God, right?
Yeah.
So
And yes, Helios, yes, it does 100% depend on what kind of game you're playing.
Yeah, which version. But I either believe that God exists or I do not believe that God exists. That's also in classical logic. And by the way, I still think that there are other forms of logic out there much better equipped to talk about things in a more nuanced way, like epistemic logic and things of that nature. But in classical logic, which, again, I hate for this purpose, but you either believe or you don't believe, right? Now, you start getting into other logics and more multi-valued and other things, and I think there's more nuance to be had. But in classical, you either believe or you don't believe. We all know this. So if you're not a theist, you don't believe. Everything that's not a theist, it does not believe.
There's kind of a bizarre thing going on here. At this point he says, I don't know if I believe or not. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know how you could not know whether you believe something or not. Now, there might be some cases where you might actually have this weird thing going on, and this is why some other logic, like this, what's called dosastic logic, allow for certain things like peculiar reasoning and things of that nature.
Okay, but
not in classical.
But right here you've got, I don't know if I believe. Okay, but you're talking about the belief itself. I don't know if I believe in belief is what this sentence reads like, whereas what they're referring to is, do you believe a God exists? In which case you could say, I don't know, because you can be undecided because you haven't. What?
The real good rule of thumb is if you can't answer yes, then it's going to be a you don't believe, right? If I say, do you believe aliens exist, and you say, well, I can't say that I believe they exist, then you don't believe they exist. You either believe or you don't believe. That's not saying that you believe that they do not exist, right? Just because you say I do not believe aliens exist, it does not entail you don't believe.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that you're not necessarily agnostic on the situation.
Right. Well, you could actually, if I say, hey, look, Chesh, do you believe aliens exist? And you say, well, I can't say I believe aliens exist. There's two options to be had. Either A, you really do have no belief either way, agnostic, or B, you hold the belief that the aliens do not exist. Either one of those is possible. Because
the other option is that I don't believe aliens exist, or I believe aliens exist. So saying I don't know if aliens exist or not, you don't believe they do, but you also don't believe they don't either.
Yeah, if you say I don't know if aliens exist or not, you're kind of entailing that you have no belief either way. Well, no, not necessarily. No, hey, hang on. No, that's not true. Let me correct that. If you're saying that I don't know if I don't know if aliens exist either way, you still can hold a belief either way. I could say I believe aliens exist, but I don't have a knowledge claim either way. So yeah, that would be. Just because you don't have a knowledge claim either way, you still can have a belief.
Yeah, you're running into a problem down here that gets way more complicated because the premise is not a correct premise to go off of. The reason why the agnostic isn't forced to make a decision, they can't answer, I don't know if I believe or not. They say, I don't believe, but I also don't not believe either.
Yeah, what decision is the agnostic trying to be forced to make here? I don't get what he's saying.
Yes or no. He's trying to say the agnostic can't say, I don't know if I believe God exists or not.
They could, but the problem is it really gets to some kind of irrationality at some point, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, well, that's because the premise, the reason why this makes no sense, and the reason why this is starting to fall apart as soon as you try to quantify what the issue is here, is because the premise is messed up. So you've got 3 paragraphs or 4 paragraphs.
It's all over the place. Yeah, it's all
where there isn't, you can't really rationally describe what's incorrect down here because it's been built on something that doesn't make sense at its foundation.
I like the way you put it. I like the way you put it rationally, because these assuming principle of rationality, right?
Well,
but I could be irrational. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
I could be irrational and hold I believe and don't believe at the same time, right? I mean, there are papers out there where there's a irrational state where you can believe and not believe and some other stuff and weird stuff, and it gets really confusing really quickly. But there's papers out there on that very topic.
But you notice that we're running into the problem where we're starting to get confused about how to even break down why this questioning or line of reasoning is confusing. And it's because, and the answer is because we can't really break it down on its own because it's the premise that's got the problem.
There's a lot of premises. There's a lot of issues with this. Yeah, it's all over the place. And real quick side note. So Ozzy says mesotheism is the hatred of God, not religion. Typically, mesotheist or theist. I don't know any. I mean, I would like to hear an argument of mesotheist being anything but theist.
Well, you have to believe in something to hate it.
Yeah, I mean, because if not, you're just hating the concept and not the object itself. And so, if anybody could do it, it's Ozzy. But Ozzy, if you can tell me an example of a mesotheist that's not a theist, I'd be really interested in hearing that. Because I can't think
that
of one.
argument.
Not saying there aren't any. It's just I don't see how you could. You know.
By that line of reasoning, it would essentially be that if an atheist hates God, they're talking about the concept and by proxy the religion itself.
Yeah, because all
not actually the God itself.
Yeah, I don't see.
But I mean, you can have hatred for fictional characters.
Sure. Well, you get into what's called fictionalism too. But I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were talking about concrete and not getting into this verification fallacy, I don't know how you could go to say, as an atheist, saying, "Well, atheists hate God." Well, in order to hate God, you have to believe in God. I think. To me, that follows.
It depends on whether or not you
if not,
are
you get verification.
Yeah, it depends on whether or not you're ascribing the same kind of an emotion like hatred to like something that's active, because you can have an emotional response to something without believing that thing is true.
Yeah, but again, you're talking about the concept. You're talking about the referent, not the reference.
No,
right?
not necessarily.
You're talking about the pointer, not the object.
Well, if I have, right. So if I have a significant other and somebody presents to me, would you hate them if I could answer that emotionally and say, yeah, I would hate them if they did that. Right. So, and that doesn't mean that I'm in that case, I'm hating the scenario that I'm being presented with that person. Like, it's complicated.
Sure. But I mean, you could treat this in fictionalism, you can treat certain things certain ways. Like, but for example, if I say I hate Superman, okay, and I wanted to treat that proposition as something that is truth, apt, true, and false, as Superman being a fictional character, which is how I would interpret it, I would say that's false. I like Superman, right?
Well, yeah, you could hate on, like, let's say you hated Lord Voldemort. Hating Lord Voldemort could mean that you actually enjoy the story. That's what you're actually saying, because you're emotionally invested in the story that you're reading, so much so that you're having an emotional response to one of the characters within the story. So by that concept, you could say that you could be an atheist and hate God, but you're referring to the character within the story, or you're referring to the concept itself, in which case
Ozzy says some theists accuse atheists of being mesotheists, but only because they believe all non-theists secretly believe in their God. Well, yeah, but that's
and then Letty said cop Sitenberg.
Yeah, that's Siten bullshit. But yeah, so that's not really to me still to be a mesotheist, you have to be an atheist. You have to be a theist, because what they're saying at that point, if that's the case, they want to argue. They're saying that all atheists are actually theists, and there are no such thing as atheist.
Yeah.
Right. If they're saying all people know God, they're saying by entailment, all people are theists, which cannot be the case, because in order to know God exists, you have to believe God exists, and we know there are people that believe God does not exist or don't believe that God exists, but they're thinking those people are lying. So what they're saying is, if all atheists know God exists, therefore they all believe God exists, or they're suppressing it in their unrighteousness or whatever, there are no such thing as atheists. And I've seen people run that argument before. There are no such thing as atheist. Now you just nullify that. You just nullify that whole position.
Yeah, I think you run. Let's go to the next thing, because we're going to run into a whole nother problem.
See how fun this stuff is? Yeah, great.
It makes for interesting conversation, a lot of thought experiments.
And it's so funny. I get so much shit from the skeptic community, and yet people that have looked into this stuff go,
they just hate fun. Obviously, cool. That's the only logical conclusion. We talk about Steve and I talk about philosophy and have fun. The chat and Steve and I have talk about philosophy. Steve and I have fun. The atheist, the skeptic community dislike Steve and I. They dislike philosophy. They dislike fun.
Yeah, that's
Fuck
true.
you.
I've had that people have. They're like, well, we want to talk about atheism, but we hate philosophy, and I'm like, oh, That's like
Well, then
that's the ultimate
hate
cringe.
philosophy is fun. They hate philosophy, therefore they hate fun.
The best way I can describe it to people would be this: I love evolutionary theory, but I hate biology. So I want to talk about evolutionary theory, but I hate talking about biology. There's a problem there, and they don't seem to understand. They'll see it with biology, but they don't see it with philosophy. All right, moving on. Let's not forget, you can't prove the non-existence of something, and why would you? Well, that's not necessarily the case. There is something called proof by impossibility, proof by contradiction, modus tollens. You can prove the non-existence of something. I can prove there are no such things as three-sided squares. They do not exist. I can prove this. Proof by impossibility.
What's that? It's what is it? Evidence of absence is not
evidence of absence is not absence of
evidence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. But I don't think I buy that.
I don't either.
I think I buy that for like some things. Like it would make sense just because I don't have like, I don't know, something sitting beside me doesn't mean that thing doesn't exist, right? It's absent, but that doesn't mean it's not real or it doesn't exist. But I'm not willing to buy that if you make all of these claims over and over and over again and none of these claims come to fruition and there's no way to verify half of them and this, that, and the other thing, then yeah, I'm not going to buy that the absence of the evidence that the thing I'm claiming isn't evidence of its absence. I'm like, no, I think it might be.
Yeah, no, I would put that kind of under just an aphorism. It's just something, that general statement that's held, but I think I wrote something on that too, that that doesn't always hold. Or I remember writing something about refrigerator and beer, and I don't remember my exact argument, but I think that aphorism is just an idiom that people use, but I think there's some problems with it. All right, so yeah, you can prove a negative. Like I said, I can prove by a possibility that a three-sided square doesn't exist. So he's just
like how you can mathematically prove why there should be life, you can also mathematically prove why there shouldn't be.
Fair enough. I don't think you can prove either way, though. I think you just I don't think you can prove life exists or not. But what?
Yeah, maybe. I think you run into a different problem though. You run into a problem when you're like, oh well, I can't prove a soul. Well, you can't prove a soul doesn't exist.
Right.
But there's no reason to. What the fuck?
Yeah. All right. Just like you can't prove the non-existence of any gods, you can't prove the non-existence of unicorns, fairies, and Santa Claus. Yeah, you actually kind of can. I don't like the way this is worded. He's using the word proof in a very different way. You can actually have a rational, logical proof that Santa Claus doesn't exist. That is both valid and sound.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can actually prove that Santa Claus doesn't exist because Santa Claus is a mythological being. So he's using it as he's trying to put a false premise here of skepticism, of like knowledge skepticism. Like, you can't prove anything because you can't know anything because knowledge doesn't exist. But you can know things. I mean, we know that Santa Claus doesn't exist. I know Santa Claus doesn't exist.
Okay, well, how about this? Can I prove that I don't have a cat? Beyond a reasonable doubt?
By skepticism,
like my cat does not exist. I don't have a cat. It does not exist. Can I prove that?
I don't think you can prove that one way or another because the word prove, I don't think you can prove ontological things like that per se.
I could
because
pick up my camera.
Well, maybe you could if you assume certain things. Like, I assume reality is real. But
well, yeah. We're not going. Never go full solipsism.
Yeah.
Hi, egghead. Never go full solipsism. So we're starting with the premise. We're starting with the presupposition. Reality is real. I exist. Cats are real. I can say that my cat does not exist. The answer is because I don't have a cat, and I can prove to you that my cat doesn't exist because there is no cat here.
Let me try. Well.
Right.
Well, it's kind of the elephant argument. If I say that I believe there's an elephant in my room. And I don't find any evidence, like elephant scat or my room's been trampled. You're then justified to believe there's no elephant. I'm cool with that. But we're talking about proof. But if I said, I'm running this by Ozzy, if he's still listening, if my proof went something along the lines of, and I'm gonna pull this out of my ass real quick. So, Santa Claus is a mythological being. Or you know what? Fairies, we'll say, or unicorns. Doesn't matter. Santa Claus is a mythological person. All mythological things do not exist. Therefore, Santa Claus does not exist. What premise is invalid or is not true, and how is that not sound, and how is not valid? Because it seems valid and sound.
wouldn't you be able to go? Yeah, I would say so, but wouldn't you be able to then go into, well, how can you demonstrate that it's mythological?
You don't have to.
Okay.
You've demonstrated by the argument itself, by rational premise, because unicorns are mythological creatures. They are. That's how what I mean.
By definition.
By definition, they're, and so it's not like we're describing, and we're not. It's just not descriptive, right? Unicorns. We're not describing a real object, right?
What the problem is you're running into is that God is not considered a mythological creature.
God is not considered a mythological creature, right?
It's not accepted that he is a mythological
Correct.
creature, so you wouldn't be able to use the same argumentation when you're referring to.
And I agree. And at some point in the future, if we got to the point where we can say,
better at this.
You're getting really good at this. If we came to the point in the future where we said all gods are mythological, all of them, right, and that's accepted, then I think that we can make on that premise a knowledge claim that there are no gods and be justified to do so. That's how I personally look at it. I'd love to hear other people's views on that, and I'm open to change on that accordingly. Now, Ozzy says the question stating that Santa is mythological is question begging. The soundness that needs to be demonstrated, which I think is easy. Is it really question begging though? Because I mean, if Santa Claus is defined to be a mythological creature, right?
Well,
that's
then
not question begging per se.
But at that point, it wouldn't even need to go that far. If you've already defined it into being mythological, you don't have to go any further.
Yeah, well, that's why I don't see why it's question begging. Because okay, give me a D&D thing. We'll I don't know, pick something. A gelatinous cube. Or what the hell are those cubes that go through the dungeon?
That's a gelatinous cube, yeah.
Okay, gelatinous cube. Is that what they're called, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so gelatinous cubes somebody created this, right? Somebody put it in the Fiend Folio, whatever the hell it is. We know it doesn't exist because somebody created it. So if I say gelatinous cubes are a created entity for D&D that has no ontology, I'm not question begging it because that's something we can actually demonstrate.
It's a fact. Now, I could say that gelatinous cubes do exist, and I could say
is that what they're called? I don't think they're
any buffet, and you can find a cube made of Jello and gelatin, so therefore it is a gelatinous cube. Then we're changing the definition of what a gelatinous cube
really
is.
Actually is. That's what they're called. My God.
Yes. Did you not believe me?
I did believe you, but oh my God, you don't have no idea how much I pulled out of my ass.
It is gelatinous cube.
Yeah.
I was going to say Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl?
Yeah.
that's the Leviathan mythos from that, though.
Well, not in...
No, not Quetzalcoatl. I'm sorry. Quetzalcoatl would be Indian. What is it, the Mayans? I thought you said... Cthulhu would be
Cthulhu,
yeah.
Cthulhu.
Yeah, so gelatinous cube is a 10-foot cube of transparent gelatinous ooze which is able to absorb and digest organic matter.
What's the other one? I was thinking of it's like a chicken. It's like a raptor chicken that petrifies people. Petrifying chicken.
Ozzy says Santa isn't defined as mythological.
Cockatrice.
Cockatrice. Yeah, I remember cockatrice. That's not part of what defines Santa. To include mythological in the definition would absolutely beg question. Okay, I kind of see his point on that. Okay, I do see his point on that because it isn't defined to be mythological. Just like we're defining, like for example, we define zero exclamation point as zero factorial to be 1. We're defining that to be the case. So I think he's probably right because we're not prescriptively defining the Santa to be mythological. Basilisk, that's a good one too.
Basilisk are the snake lizards.
All right, Ozzy,
sometimes they're snakes.
Sometimes
they're lizards. Sometimes they have legs. Sometimes they don't have legs.
I think Ozzy makes sense. He's right on that. We're not. It's not.
I love
prescriptively saying.
Did
Santa
you guys
is defined to be mythological?
Did you guys know that you can get an adult cockatrice, and an adult cockatrice is the size of a rock? And that's going to sound silly to you who don't know what a rock is. A rock is an eagle the size of a dragon.
ROC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A rock.
Yeah.
So you can find a cockatrice that is the size of a dragon with petrifying gaze. And it looks like a giant flying raptor, but I'm not sure it can actually fly. I have to look that up. Hold on. I have to find out if this thing can fly or if it's just a giant fucking chicken running around.
That'd be cool if they had flying gelatinous cubes.
Why? Yeah, of course you can have a flying gelatinous cube. Yeah, you just cast a fly spell on it.
Oh, that's easy. I guess anything in D&D can fly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, if you just cast a flying spell on it.
because
See, when you have magic, all this shit goes through the window, right?
I was actually working on an NPC character that is essentially a character that has tried to build a factory for making potions. So essentially, you can get large quantities of what would be considered rare potions, because what he does is he sends the party out to go, hey, can you guys go capture me a gelatinous cube? Because then he just essentially milks the gelatinous cube to get whatever gelatinous cube parts he needs to like mass produce different alchemist potions and stuff.
We're gonna have to play D&D one of these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you guys notice though, whenever you involve magic, a lot of this stuff just goes out the window? Because if God exists and he could change the rules at any time, that would be problematic. Because how would you ever then have something like the uniformity of nature? How could you ever have something like induction? If God exists, now again, this is just pulling out my ass argument. I haven't really sussed any of this rule out, but that much. But if God exists, could you not argue that in something like induction could never be justified? And I believe induction is not justifiable, but if God exists, we could never have knowledge of anything to be certain, because God can change the rules of the game of anything.
Cockatrices do have a fly speed.
Unless you argue like certain things, can we know that God can exist? Well, if you have the omnipotent being that's all present, all powerful, all this other stuff, he cannot cease to exist according to what is the principle of eternal verities, if I remember correctly. But still, God could change a lot of the rules, and so the uniform nature just goes right out the window if God exists, a powerful enough God.
Can I share screens?
You should be able to.
Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. This is the giant cockatrice. It's gargantuan. It has a fly speed of 100 feet. This is 5th edition.
Yeah, they're pretty big.
Look at it.
They used to be this little chicken
Rain
thing.
of spines. The giant cockatrice releases her spines all in one deadful attack. The creatures that are in a cone of 90 feet in front of the cockatrice must succeed in a dex saving throw or take 51 piercing damage.
Yeah, they used
creatures
to
that failed
small.
must also succeed a Constitution saving throw.
Let me ask you a question on D&D real quick, because I don't remember how we did this.
It's a cockatrice, by the way.
If you have let's say you have a bird that's you're fighting or something, and it has claw damage 1d1 3 1 to 3 damage for claws, 2 claws, and then it has a bite, and the bite is 1d6.
Sure.
Are you supposed to do see if it hits for the one claw, see if it hits for the other claw, see if it hits for the bite, and then do damage?
If it has, sure. There's multiple ways you can do it. It depends on it. All entirely, essentially, depends on whether or not the creature has multi-attack.
I want to have a single attack.
If it has a single attack, then you're choosing which one you're using.
How does the DM choose that? Because I don't remember.
They get to pick.
Oh, really? You just get to pick it?
Yeah, you can make it random if you want to. As a DM, you can choose it. It usually what you do as a DM is you kind of put yourself into the monster's point of view and what you think would be the most likely thing for them to do.
Okay.
So if you have a bear and the bear has multi-attack, but the multi-attack only applies to the claws, so it can either bite you or it can claw at you twice. The bear might not be very likely to try and bite somebody covered in armor, so it's going to claw. So it'll do the two.
Well, not necessarily. It could be a dumb bear.
Absolutely, it depends. But keep in mind that these monsters have stat blocks. The bear has an intelligence and a wisdom score.
Yeah.
So you can use that to kind of and decide. And maybe it's a gnarled bear that's been around for a while and it knows what armor is, and it's like, no,
so
I've
a really
seen that
good DM
before.
will actually just kind of put themselves in the situation rather than make it all stochastic.
Yeah, that's why you end up with goblins that aren't so stupid sometimes, or why you end up with kobolds who aren't keen on.
Kobolds are stupid by definition.
Except they're really good at making traps, and so they don't tend to fight out in the open. They tend to make you chase them.
Inkboy asks, "What's your definition of a god?" Now, I have a stipulative thing, and I'm fine when people use stipulative terms. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not a prescriptivist. I'm a descriptivist. But my personal thing that I kind of when I talk to people about what I think is a god, I use something very simple. I don't care who adopts it, and Ozzy will probably shit all over it because that's what Ozzy does to me. But I just say that to me, a god is a being that can prescriptively change the fundamental laws of the universe. Is powerful enough to do that. If they're powerful enough to change the fundamental laws of the universe, they can say, you know what, I don't want Boltzmann constant to be this, right? I don't want H to be this. I don't want the speed of light to be this. If they're power enough to change those, to me, I'm going to call that a god. You don't have to. Even if it's a sufficient creature from a multiverse, I'm going to call that a god. To me is not just preternatural. It's beyond preternatural. It is, to me, some form of supernatural to have that much power. But again, you might put it into preternaturalism and say, well, that's still not a god. Well, that's fine. To me, that's just a working thing for me if somebody asks me that question. It's subject to change, though, by the way.
I don't define God. I think that's kind of a waste of time for me, personally.
And to do something completely opposite of the universe would be able to change it. So, well, how would you? What's your working thing for a god?
I don't have one.
You let other people describe it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, I have a problem with that. Let me tell you the problem.
Sure.
And yeah, Dr. Kroon, my light's going out. Dr. Kroon couldn't do it today. We're going to do something else. He doesn't want to do the holographic principle and firewall paradox. I'm going to find somebody else for that, but he has some astrophotography stuff that we're going to be talking about, which is going to be cool.
Very cool.
So, the reason I have the problem with what you just said is that if you let them define it, then how are you an atheist if you haven't really if the proposition God does not exist or God exists and you find that to be false, if you don't have a working definition of God, how have you gone about evaluating that proposition? You've actually in your mind have something because you've evaluated it.
I don't define it myself is more what I mean. So essentially what that comes down to is like I don't spend my time sitting around thinking about what I would classify as a god. What I do is I've essentially evaluated the one that I grew up with. I've evaluated every one that I've had a chance to look at, and I'm like, no, none of these are real. So if I go ahead and this is why I tend to stand by, yeah, I don't believe that gods exist. However, I'm willing to have that discussion with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you present to me something that I would that you can say, yeah, no, this is a god, I might be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well, let me get back to that. No, I'll include violate natural law as well on that. Just stipulate.
Yeah, now if you
because Ozzy's right, Greco-Roman gods only violated laws; they didn't change them. So to me, prescriptively could change laws or somehow violate them. I'll put that in the same category. So
yeah, I would classify like what I would say is like if I were to run into Zeus now, I might not consider him a god, but I also am kind of a little bit of a shit. So if I were to run into the God of the Bible, I might be like, and what constitutes you as a god? So realistically, I would want God to define himself.
But here's my question to you: when you get asked the question, do you believe God exists or does God exist? You're evaluated. What are you using for that God? What are you instantiating with that?
Well, that's why I usually ask the person.
No.
Remember before? Let me finish.
But it doesn't matter what they're asking.
That's why. Well, this is the difference, right? I'm not a philosopher. I don't have these questions on the basis of on the predication of somebody is asking me about this whole entire philosophical topic. When I'm having these conversations, the people I'm talking to are coming to me with a premise already in their mind, and they're not asking me if I believe a god or what a god is. They're asking if I believe. What they're actually asking me is if I believe their god, and everybody's got a different one. And so I don't get anywhere in the conversation if I impose my personal understanding of it. So I just don't. So I just allow that person to say, okay, well, describe to me what you're talking about. So that way we can actually move the conversation forward, because this is not the type of scenario where I'm having these conversations.
All right. Well, okay. Let's say my stipulative definition of a god. So a god that can change or violate known laws of physics. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I'd be fine. Yeah, I'd be fine to accept that definition.
Is that how? So when I say does God exist, is that how you're interpreting it? That, or do you have your own stipulative definition?
No, I would interpret it in your definition also. I usually just tend to, when somebody asks me that question, I try to find out what they're talking about so I can answer more accurately.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's just, it's a little pendant, because if I say, hey, do you believe dogs exist? You're going to say, well, what do you mean by dogs, Steve?
I mean, I might, because honestly, if you're coming to me with like this little rat thing, I'm not going to think it's a dog.
That's a chihuahua. That's not a dog. No, I love chihuahuas. Yeah,
it's cute, but they're not dogs.
Yeah. We're talking about Ricky Gervais. Yeah, we've already been through all that. So,
I think that you run into a problem. I think it really depends on who your audience is, who you're having the conversation with, and what setting are you having the conversation in. If I'm having a conversation in a debate and the conversation is does God exist? Well, that's really not very specific. Who am I talking to in this debate?
Yeah, well, that's why I think that a lot
Right?
of that needs to be done before the debate, right? Because the
Yeah,
question doesn't exist.
exactly.
Let's get out of the way.
So
I'm again, I give in mind stipulative usage of the term a God that can prescriptively change the laws of the universe or violate them. Yeah, that's fine too, because Greco-Roman gods violated them. They didn't change them. They just said, "Hey, these laws exist," but at that point, are they really laws? You know, to
that's
me, if you, I mean, I could probably make an argument, and again, Ozzy will shit on me because that's what he does. Say, look, I am violating these laws of physics, which means I am in some way changing them. I'm saying they're not applicable. I've changed them somehow,
well, you
but they
do
don't
run into this
apply.
whole other problem that if God changes the laws of physics, then the laws of physics have been changed, but they're still the laws of physics. They've just been changed to something that they weren't before, but they're still now, these
They've
are
been
now the
heavily
new laws.
modified.
Yeah, but they're still laws. They're still the laws of physics. So just because it'd be,
But aren't you change? Look, no. But if I
right?
change,
You run
no,
into weird
no, look,
problems.
if I could change the law of physics, where law like the energy conservation of mass and energy, right? If I could say, hey, I'm going to create an energy beam out of my eyeballs, right? I have changed laws, the fundamental constants. I have created energy. There's been this fundamental constants have been
But
changed by
Steve,
violating these laws.
Your
Maybe,
body is always creating energy.
yeah, from mass.
Sure.
I eat
So
food.
how is it not possible that you ate enough food and therefore were able to power the
Lasers.
lasers coming out of your eyeball? Yeah, see?
No, I mean, legit creating energy from like nothing. That would be to me not just a violation or suspension of no laws, but I could actually try to make an argument that it does change fundamental constants. Maybe
Sure.
but see, these are the topics that I enjoy. Whether I'm right or wrong on that is irrelevant. I just like positing these types of arguments, and then somebody will go, "Well, how about this, Steve?" And I go, yeah, that's right," and we'll change the argument. That's how we solidify our arguments. I'm happy to somebody go, "Hey, Steve, I don't think it's a good argument because you're changing it, but you're not. I mean, so you're violating, but you're not changing. Let me explain to you why, and I'll listen. And if I change, that's great. That's what we like to do here. That's all what the Great Debate community was about.
Well, that's part of the fun, right? Neither of
Yeah.
us are terribly attached
Right.
to any of the arguments that I think that we've made today. Like, I'm totally fine with Steve changing my mind, and I'm totally fine.
Well, I'm
in being
attached to
like,
the atheist agnostic thing. You know, that's kind of a done deal. But yeah, but the
well,
rest,
yeah, but
these
what I'm
arguments I come up
saying
with,
is that if,
yeah.
yeah, we're not really attached to the individual type thing. I'm not terribly attached to the label.
Yeah.
I don't really give that much of a shit because it's exhausting and I don't care. I'm also not always necessarily trying to convince somebody else. And in this kind of discussion, neither of us are really trying to convince the other. We're just trying to have a more fun discussion about the situation.
Yeah, and that's what I like about these things. And that's why when people say, well, you can't disagree with Steve, I was like, are you kidding me? I love when people disagree with me because that means that we're having an actual discussion. So, Chester, let me
There's a
ask you this question
conversation.
because I've explained this before and see if you. So, when
Oh,
Joker's
God.
Wild says, I say, quote, I am an atheist because I remain unconvinced. What's the problem with that statement?
Well, I'm assuming they mean unconvinced of God, right?
Yeah, of God
because
claims.
because you're not an atheist because you have by that definition because an atheist is an
Well,
atheist
no.
holds a position.
That's not my problem with that statement.
Okay, like we said, there's more than one problem with the statement,
Okay.
right? So one of the problems is an atheist is a belief proposition.
Okay.
You don't believe. Right. So by you say I'm an atheist because I remain unconvinced, that's not.
No, you're right. No, you're right.
You're not unconvinced. It's contradicting, is what I'm saying.
Well, no, I don't think it's contradicting. What I think is vacuous.
Oh, sure, yeah. But there's also an
as
issue
long as it's
with
redundant. It doesn't tell you anything.
There's also a weird thing in here that I think that is just going to be the English in me, not the philosophical. That is I am an atheist because I remain unconvinced, which makes me think you could have been convinced, but you're choosing not to be convinced for some reason, which is a weird kind of situation. But I think that might just be the language being used and not the.
That might be. But if I said I don't believe because I don't believe, would you agree that that is tautological?
Well, it's redundant.
Yes. Well, it's tautology. I don't believe because I don't believe is to me it would be a tautology, but it's it's at least tautological. But it's definitely redundant.
Well, it would run into you run into the same problem. I believe the Bible because the Bible tells me so.
Okay, but if I say, hey, why don't you believe? And you say, well, I don't believe God's exist. Whether you define atheism as belief or not belief doesn't matter. But if I say I don't believe God exists because I'm not convinced, it's not informing you of anything, because all people who don't believe in God are not convinced. I can deduce
that's
that.
why I'm saying. Well, that's why I'm saying it's actually contradicting, because if an atheist is not convinced that there is a God, then saying they remain unconvinced doesn't actually mean what atheism does by those definitions.
Well, all atheists don't believe in God, right?
Right. So
Okay.
that's what I'm saying. So provided you're
So
using,
all atheists are unconvinced.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that if you're holding, by saying that you are unconvinced, to me, you run into a problem if you're saying that gods don't exist because I'm unconvinced.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay,
Right?
yeah, right. Because you're convinced. If you're saying, yeah, because you're right on that. I get you. So you're saying that there's a problem, which there would be, because if you're unconvinced, how could you be an atheist? Because atheists are unconvinced. I mean, so atheists are convinced. They're convinced that God does not exist.
They're convinced. Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
so
I'm following you on that. We're good.
Yeah. So again, that might be an issue with the language, not actually the philosophy of what they're trying to say.
No, I'm on board with you. But you agree that the statement "I'm an atheist because I'm unconvinced" is vacuous. It doesn't tell you anything. It's so I can tell by all atheists are unconvinced. That's like saying, I'm a non-theist because I don't believe. Well, clearly you're a non-theist because all non-theists don't believe. That doesn't tell you anything.
I'm a theist because I am convinced. Well, obviously. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Tim.
That's why I think that the atheist community of Austin, where they say these things on like Atheist Edge, like, well, I'm an atheist because I haven't been presented evidence to sufficiently convince me. I'm like, no shit. I could deductively infer that, and deduction doesn't give you new information. Induction does.
Well, Joker brought up another point. They said, I do not accept a God exists until someone can convince me that one does. Does that work?
No,
because you're running into different problems.
Yeah, no, because you could, first of all, you can convince yourself. You don't need to have anybody else convince you of anything.
Correct. Right? It's also not necessarily, depending on where you are, not other people's job to convince you.
Yeah.
You're putting the onus of your own belief onto other people. And that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, my beliefs are not contingent upon other people's convincing me. Sometimes, but
it's almost like you're shifting responsibility for your own epistemology and your own belief system onto and predicating it on what other people have done. Or predicating it on what other people you have even just spoken to alone. And so you run into problems when you're doing something like that, because it's not other people's responsibility.
Yeah, and by the way,
you should own your own thing and your reasons why you own that thing. You shouldn't predicate it on somebody else convincing you. That's just kind of petty.
If Jeff's still out there, you want to give him the link, because we told him he can come in later. But this cup of coffee is hot says, I don't believe in God. Whoever says atheists believe in no gods are dumb. Well, every atheist philosopher that I know accepts atheism as the belief that God does not exist. Now, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, hundreds of papers. I have 20 citations that'll be the case for that. But he says, prove it. I'm not a believer. Last time I checked, I'm not talking about you. I have no idea what you are or not. We're talking about normativity. We're talking about how these terms are used in philosophy and academia. How you use them, whatever, that's your business.
Well,
but But make it very clear, atheism is the belief that God does not exist. How you use it is your stipulative use, but that is how it's normatively used in academia and in philosophy. That is unequivocal material fact. If you have evidence against that, please present that, and I will listen to it. But I've had legit, in how many years people try to present me evidence, not a single one of them has presented a single academic, philosophical or paper that substantiates that claim. Not one. And I have how many that I've actually demonstrated using their papers that are peer-reviewed? So good luck with that.
Yeah, I would be curious to know how many papers this person has read.
So let me ask, let's ask him while you got your Jeff in here. This cup of hot coffee is hot. Do you have any academic paper that supports your position? And philosophy is not descriptive. That means nothing to me. Do you have any citation from philosophy, from academia, that supports your position that atheism is merely just a belief that God does not exist? Because every citation you'll find...
Fine, I don't care academia.
Oh, I don't care. Okay. Well, there you
Okay,
go. So he doesn't care about academia. So basically, flat Earth level. There you go.
So,
Okay.
well, we'll put it this way.
That's like a flat earther saying, "Well, I don't care what physics says."
Yeah. So this is essentially where this person is now on from the understanding of coming to this topic.
Yeah.
I use my own definition. I don't care what any of the professionals say or the academia involved. I'm using my own definition, and anybody who doesn't use my definition is stupid.
That's basically how flat earthers argue, isn't it?
That is how flat earthers
Yeah.
argue.
So,
The Earth is flat
the Earth is
because
flat.
it looks flat.
The evidence
to
is out there. Go
me.
find it for yourself. The Earth is
And
flat.
forget the academic. I don't care what physics or science has said. I care what I can see with my eyes, and what I see is that it looks flat to me. So that's what I use to define that the Earth is flat.
I'm just amazed that
Woohoo!
I didn't mean to freeze you there. So yeah, that's bizarre. And by the way, I know Ozzy's probably busy, but I'm gonna go on a limb here, and maybe he wants to jump into it for a minute. I doubt it. He never wants to talk.
Or we are a little bit low on time, also.
I know we are low on time.
That's mark,
so get him in here real quick. But I thought we'd get Jeff in real quick because he wanted to come in.
Yeah. Well, I sent him the link, but he hasn't answered, so I don't know if he's actually still around. It's also he's in UK time, so it's probably
that's true.
Late for
it's
him.
10 o'clock for him.
Yeah.
All right. Let me just catch up on a couple things real quick.
Joker Wild said, "My definitions of atheist and theist are is this: if you are convinced a god exists, theist; if you are not convinced, atheist."
Yeah,
so
well,
that's actually the mistake. It's not a dichotomy. There's a third option.
Well, no. That is a dichotomy. Believe or don't believe is a dichotomy.
Sorry, yeah, it is. It is a dichotomy that I'm going down the wrong. Thank you. There's a third option.
These people are
between
dumb.
these two.
I guarantee it. I can get 20 people with PhDs on this topic that agrees with me right now. Citations from 20 PhDs, probably at least a dozen off the top of my head.
Well, this is just trolling at this point.
Yeah, this is trolling.
Because
I can tell you right now, go look up Dr. Draper, Dr. Malpass, Dr. JJL Smart, or JJC Smart. Go look at.
Ozzy says he's getting dinner right now.
Okay, so Burgess Jackson, Dr. Draper, Dr. McCormick. If you want to think all those people are stupid and they're all PhD atheists, be my guest. But at that point, it's just trolling.
I enjoy that an intrigued feline has a really good response. It says, "Wait, you say other people are dumb when you're openly disregarding academia?"
Yeah, I mean, we're all talking about academia and we're talking about citations, right? We're talking about evidence. It's like you're willfully saying, "I don't care about evidence. I don't care about academia. I'm going to flat earth this, and say, well." It's just the way it is because I said so. You guys are dumb for not using
my definition. Bleh.
Yeah. So
okay.
Here's a list.
I guess we're all dumb then.
Yeah. So here you go. I will give you a list of citations. There it is. I'll even screen share it for people real quick.
You've got two things when you're saying something is unconvinced. The thing is that an atheist is convinced. That's the mistake. That's in the initial. What Joker's Wild was saying. The atheist is convinced. They're just convinced that the opposite. No, they're not unconvinced.
Yeah, the atheist is not unconvinced. The atheist says in philosophy that gods do not exist. But here's my blog right here. List of citations. Citation needed. These are all. So Stanford disagrees with you. Internet Encyclopedia disagrees with you, which, by the way, is peer-reviewed. This is Dr. Draper. This is Dr. McCormick. Dr. Graham Oppie disagrees with you. Dr. Friedman disagrees with you. Malik, Blue, Smith, Boulevard, Flint, Sosa, Midimutsu, Harrison, Armstrong. I mean, all these people that I have citations for when I talk about this kind of stuff. So the sad part is that you're basically arguing like a flat earther, and it's sad. It really is. But I want people to see that.
You're not basically arguing like a flat earther. You are arguing like a flat earther.
Those are all PhDs.
You aren't using my definition, therefore you're dumb. You know what that is? The exact thing that people accuse Steve of doing.
I'm going to put him in timeout because at this point he's just trolling. And
that's fine. Yeah. But that's the exact thing they accuse Steve of doing, saying you're not using my definitions, blah blah blah, which is not what Steve is doing. Steve isn't saying you have to use my definition. He's saying you shouldn't mislead people by using your definition.
That's exactly the case. Right. I'm not prescriptive saying you have to use my definition. You don't have to use Stanford's definition, but it is a material fact that normatively, atheism is a belief that God does not exist. That is unequivocal material fact. Would you agree?
Sorry,
demonstrable.
What? I was reading the chat.
Oh,
what?
Sorry. I would say it is unequivocal, indubitable material fact that is demonstrable by evidence that normatively speaking, atheism is the belief that God does not exist, held ubiquitously throughout philosophy. I have never found a paper that says otherwise. Not one. I found 3 people, Bullivant, Martin, and Flew, who argue they want to change it.
Yes.
But that's a different. Even Flew admits in 1972 when he wrote Presumption of Atheism, he says very clearly in there, atheism is the belief that God does not exist. I would like to be held in the negative. That's his argument.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
he's just so sorry, guy. You're just fundamentally wrong on this. I would suggest you go educate yourself on the topic. If you want to talk about Dunning-Kruger, the first step in Dunning-Kruger is you admitting that you have no idea what you're talking about on this particular topic, and I think you should probably go read something on it before you come here and try to say that we're incorrect. Because, again, I'm happy to have discourse, but he presented nothing. You have to present some evidence. I presented my evidence. There you go. In the blogs, go read those papers. They'll tell you that you're wrong.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. But when you come to this is the exact same. Let's move it from flat Earth. Let's call it something else. When you have a creationist that says, like a young Earth creationist that says, well, I don't care about biology. I don't care about the academia. Evolution isn't real. That's the exact same argument we just heard.
Yeah, it's when a creationist says, "Well, I don't care how evolution is defined, which is the change of allelic frequency in a given population from one generation to the next generation over time," they say, "I don't care about that. What evolution means is change. Oh, I don't care what a species is, right? Species means kind. That's the same level of argument. There's no difference, right? And you're fine to do that." But my only goal has been from day one to get people to accept that in philosophy, normatively, atheism is the belief that God does not exist, the rejection of theism, the acceptance of the proposition of theism being false. However you want to word it, it's all the same thing. But that's a material fact. And I've had debates on this. I've never lost one because nobody's ever once presented evidence to the contrary. Not one single solitary person. And some of the people that tried a few years ago, their logic was so bad that it did take. It didn't take, but I mean, Dr. Alex Malpass, Ozzy Bertol, other people showed them why their logic was wrong. And I'm sorry, but if your logic is wrong, right? If you say like P and not P is not a contradiction, your logic is wrong. There's no ambiguity there. It's an objective fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry, Joker's Wild. No, it's cool, Joker's Wild. I get it. It's a lot of people.
You're welcome to use your definition. The only problem is that we're not talking about an individual. On an individual with, there's a difference between Joker decides to use his definition his way to describe himself because that's what he is comfortable with. That's fine. We're not telling you have to change your definition. We are, however, saying that Ricky Gervais is description and his little dissertation thingy that he wrote has a lot of errors in it, and there's a lot of people who watched him. So it is negligent was a good word that Letty used, and I think we said morally irresponsible to mislead people like that at best. And if you go over to the ACA in the past, apparently they're starting to rectify it, which is good. They were actually telling people they were incorrect when they knew damn well those people were not incorrect.
Yeah, well, that's the problem that I had when Arn Raw and Matt Dillahunty tells people. And by the way, if you try to go after me personally, is pretty sad.
I've heard Aaron's done a little bit better now recently, though.
Well, I think a lot of people they've been having to modify things a little bit because, like, they'll put in the video description. This is how we use these terms, and a lot of that is because of me and other people that were just going, "Hey, guys,
pushing back on them,
pushing back on them, right?" And
you're setting philosophy back when you do that. You're not helping people out of theism better.
Yeah, of course. Right. If anything, I'm helping the atheist. You know how many people have been atheists? I go, Steve, ever since we looked into this, read the things you've said, and adopted this as a philosophical positions, our debating has gone up extramentally because they've.
But it's also helpful so that people don't have to unlearn because they get attached to the atheism name. And they have to now all of a sudden this new thing that they found that they're a part of, and they start reaching out to find more atheists. And then a bunch of people push back and go, absolutely not, but you're already attached to it. And so now you've got to fight through actually learning something new, when learning new things should be what most things are predicated on.
I agree. And by the way, it has nothing really to do with definitions. What it has to do with is if you will accept certain, like, for example, like stipulative definitions that I have for God, right? I say, if a God is a being that can prescriptively change the laws of the universe or violate them somehow, I have to accept the baggage that comes with that, right? Either I have to accept to bite the bullet on certain things, or if somebody has a defeater for that, then I will discuss it, right?
Yeah.
So when it's not a matter of the definition, it's a matter when you adopt certain things, they have to bite the bullet on certain things. Like there are what's called category errors. They have to bite the bullet on that or try to explain them away. And I have not had one atheist do that yet. Not one. They have not explained away the category errors that are posed when you adopt sensu lato uses of words. And that's what I find to be disingenuous.
The cup of coffee account doesn't know how fallacies work.
All right, well, let's address this. So he says, have you heard of an appeal to authority fallacy? Yes, very much so. It's called
So let's describe
argumentum
what
ad
the appeal
vericundium, and I have not committed it. And let me explain to you why.
Well, no. Explain what it is first, and then we'll let chat say one in the chat. Let's explain what the fallacy is, and then
okay, explain what the fallacy is.
And then one in the chat if you think that Steve committed it.
Okay.
And 2 in the chat if you think that he did not commit it.
So one in the chat. If I committed it, if I did, 2 if you didn't.
2 if you didn't. Steve, what is the fallacy?
The
appeal to authority.
Appeal to authority or argumentum ad vericundium is only a fallacy under certain conditions. One, a person is not an expert in the topic. The person has not evaluated the topic. Or the well, actually, that's kind of it. The person is not authority or has not evaluated the particular topic. Those are usually the most common errors. For example, if I cite, he used Dr. Malpass. If I cite Dr. Malpass as an expert in biology and say, well, we're talking about evolution biology, and Dr. Malpass says this, that would be a authoritative fallacy because he's not an authority in that field. If I say Dr. Malpass, who is an authority on logic, says this, I am citing him correctly. That's not a fallacy. But however, if I said, like, for example, my mechanic on my car is an expert on cars, right? And I say, well, my mechanic says I need new brakes. That's not a fallacy if he has looked at my car and said, you need new brakes. I'm citing an expert that I need new brakes. But if my mechanic has not looked at my car, he's still an expert. But it's a fallacy because he's not he's not actually done the analysis to successfully know whether I have the new brakes or not. So those are types of fallacies. Now,
so there's a difference between a fallacy, committing a fallacy, and citing a source.
Yeah, when you're citing an expert, that's not a fallacy. When you're citing an expert, that's called citation. Now,
otherwise, any paper ever written in university would be a fallacy.
Right. And he says, you're saying if you don't agree with Dr. Malpass and me, you're wrong. Well, that's not necessarily the case. No. I'm saying if you don't accept the material fact that normatively in philosophy and academia that atheism is a belief, you're wrong. Yes, I think that you're categorically wrong on that. I don't see how you get away with that unless you have evidence to the contrary.
And here's the thing: who wouldn't? There's a little bit of a problem here. If you don't understand who the people are that actually get to make that decision, who counts as being the normative, useful? Who are the people that would need to be using the terms to call it normative usefulness in academia? Well, it would be the academics. So to demonstrate that what Steve's saying is true, you would have to show the people who actually would qualify as the people using it in a normative sense in the academia would have to be those people that are using it in academia.
Yeah.
So therefore, those people would be like Dr. Malpass and like the whole list of citations. Those are all, that would be the people we're talking about that are using it normatively in academia.
Yeah. I mean,
now, if Steve were to say, normatively as a general populace, no, that would entirely depend on where you're talking about because different places use words differently depending on where you live. So that would be untrue. But normative in academia, all he has to do is show that look at these people who are in the field using the definition of this word in this way. And it's common enough that the majority of those people are using it in that manner would demonstrate his point, and it would not be a fallacy.
Okay, and I agree with that. So name one philosopher that would say that in philosophy it's not normative. The only one that even come close, and I doubt if you ever read the papers by a guy named Stephen Bullivant, who's a theist, by the way, and what he wrote in the Heidelberg of Oxford Handbook, but he wrote an opinion piece as an opinion piece, and that he doesn't claim that atheism is normatively lack of belief. He doesn't claim that at all. But name me a philosopher who doesn't claim that that atheism is normatively not the belief that God does not exist. I'd be happy to go read that paper if you have one. you think he's going to provide one? I can tell you right now he won't, but let's see if he even attempts to.
Anyway, I think we fully demonstrated that was not. Jeff can't come, but
Okay.
I think we can pretty much demonstrate how that was not in fact the fallacy.
Yeah, so I did not
Or
commit an
she.
appeal for
I'm
it.
not judging. They
Yeah.
might be a girl.
But you notice how people throw out fallacies when they don't understand the fallacy correctly? It's
Well, I mean, yeah.
It's so common among.
Are you
and I
asking
see-
me or the chat?
Yeah, well, all the above. But I see atheists do it all the time. I mean, I see them actually do it more often than theists, and that's disconcerting because, you know, I want atheists to have better arguments. And when I see a group of atheists just throw out fallacies and they get them wrong, it's like, oh, man, you're not helping anybody. I'm a non-believer, right? So me and atheist, we're all non-believers. So in some way, they're making all non-believers look bad when they do stuff like that, right? And I
Is
don't like
somebody
that.
saying that English is all of English, the language is derived only from Greek because
No, old German, Latin, Spanish.
Well,
I don't know.
I think there might be a problem with that.
Yeah.
I think there might be some errors in there, but I feel like we should get somebody who's a little bit more of a professional on it than I am to actually go through the history of the language of English. We should call Dapper Dino. Dapper Dino would be able to cover that shit.
Does he study history? I mean, I know he does linguistic stuff, but does he study the history, like what's called diachronic usage?
As far as I know, he definitely would at least know more than I do.
Interesting.
But we should. We're
gonna wrap it up. Yep.
We're not getting any things. Maybe, perhaps someday that person would like to send me a message on Twitter or maybe email Steve to get vetted to actually come onto the show, and you can actually come and show.
Sure, but I would like to have. Yeah, but I'd like them to give me a paper or something that. I mean, so far they've presented no evidence.
Well, that would be part of the vetting. That would be part of the vetting process.
Okay. Because, you know, they always love evidence. Bring evidence, right? Bring evidence. I
think Cup of Coffee came to the wrong show. They thought this was Caffeine Corner.
Here comes the dumb atheist fallacy. What does that even mean?
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Whatever. We're wrapping up.
We're wrapping up. But anyways, I want people to see the basal level of argumentation when these people they're not going to do anybody any favors when they don't have a real good argument. They don't present any evidence. They haven't read any of the literature. Like I said, I'm a non-theist, so I want atheists to up their game, right? I actually enjoy listening to atheists argue against theists more than the theists arguing against the atheist. However, there are times when the theist gets shit right. I mean, and you have
English is a mutt language, yes. It's made up of like a bunch of different garbage. It's just an amalgamation of bullshit.
Paul says that would be the fallacy. No, the fallacy is actually when you say that the conclusion is not true based upon a mistake in the logical structure. Like if a premise wrong, because the conclusion still could be true even though you have a false premise. So the fallacy would be something where you say, "Hey, look, premise 2 is wrong, therefore the conclusion is wrong." No,
if we want to
you
have
to say
an
the
episode
conclusion is
about
a follow
fallacies,
from 2, but the conclusion still can be true. That's the fallacy.
If we want to have an episode about fallacies, we should bring on Red's Rhetoric.
Actually, no. What the best would be actually my friend Martimer81.
Can we get Martimer and
the Masonic, TMM? He's good at them too.
So we need to have a fallacy party.
We could have that too, but those guys love that stuff. They would be happy.
Fallacy party.
Fallacy party. Yeah.
So what do? We like pull up a T-jump debate and we let them point out the fallacies and take a drink every time there's a fallacy.
Could be.
That could be fun.
Fun drinking game. All right, guys, we appreciate it very much. Like I said, sorry this wasn't on holographic principle. I have to postpone that a little bit because Dr. Crew wants to do something else. And that's fine. But I will find somebody who's really good on the firewall paradox and how information. It's going to be a DEF CON 1 science episode. I just got to find somebody that was willing to. I was going to talk to Dr. Sarah Silva. What's her name? Dr. Sarah. What is her last name? How does she pronounce it? Salvidina? I don't remember. But she doesn't want to talk to non-Christians, even if it's about astrophysics, which I think is weird because she's an astrophysicist. But I'll find somebody because I'm fascinated by that paradox. It's one of the most interesting paradoxes there is, whether information is, well, we know now information is conserved. That's what Dr.
I would like to do a quick teaser because Justin brought it up. Miss good old-fashioned King Crocoduck debate. I'm looking currently at setting up a talk for Non Sequitur once we're back between Dapper Dino and Crocoduck.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So
what are they going to disagree? What are they going to be disagree on?
I don't know if they'll be disagreeing. It might just be really, really educational. We'll have to see.
All right. Well, sounds good. All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll be back with Caffeine Corner tomorrow morning at 11 p.m. Pacific time. 11 a.m. Pacific time. Sorry.
Who
Right.
knows what the topic will be? We haven't decided yet.
We don't even know yet. I just have some ideas. All right, guys. Good night.
Maybe we'll go to Onision's house. We haven't
Oh
decided.
God, no. We could, you know what though? We could bring that up though. You know what? We'll go over it. But I think that if you guys don't know, we were on Drunken Peasants last night, and it was on the fallout of Billy going to Onision's house and how he got excoriated by some of the tribalistic virtue signals out there that thinks that he didn't. He shouldn't have been so nice to Onision.
He didn't beat him up.
He didn't punch him or something like that. It was really bizarre.
That's illegal.
These tribalists going, oh my God, Billy associated with, you know, a groomer. And yet they don't seem to understand that what Billy was trying to do was get Onision to actually have a conversation with him. Now,
He wasn't even trying to do that. Whatever. We'll talk about this on Monday.
yeah. Well, give me a heads up. I can tell you this. Billy was violated by Onision and touched and humped inappropriately. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Tune in. Good night.
See you next time.